And the answer right now is yes. Yes, I am recording. I did not forget to record the intro. God damn it. There was even a channel prediction about whether I'd do it. I saw the channel prediction and went, well, now I'm going to remember to record.
Yeah, right? Yes. So I take it that you didn't.
I did not remember to record. I just started and recorded my totally unprofessional intro of, am I recording? Yes, I remembered to record. Of course I did. So for those of you who are wondering what the hell is happening, because you just started a video where someone started ranting about recording, hello and welcome to The Wandering Inn. This is the Bar Brawl, a podcasty... Sorry, I sounded like Jay Leno for a second there. A podcasty, TTRPG chat thing where I get in people I've played games with and GM'd and etc. I have GM Trooper now, finally. One of my goals in life, as a GM. And
Can we talk about one quick thing?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. Is it ice cream?
No, but
okay.
So in the last ditch, which I'm being GM'd for by Sheepy, there was a blank character sheet, like a generic character sheet called Trooper, and I was like, oh, that must be my character sheet when I went to Roll20,
yeah.
but it wasn't my character sheet. It was actually just a regular Trooper, not an SJP Trooper. There was a mix-up, but it's fine now. It's fine. I'm just saying that there was like a hilarious mix-up because of
There was
40K.
Yeah. That was all my fault as well. Like, it didn't even cross my mind that all of the templates and everything I have are called Trooper. So there's gonna be like character sheets and stuff that said just say Trooper. So Trooper probably like wandered in like, oh my god, I've got so many characters, awesome.
Is this one mine? Which one?
Okay, so we are now going to do away with the jolly music and people hitting each other because yeah. It's distracting. So, also I saw that you waved to people. It is really interesting doing this like little podcasty thing with no cams and just like, you know, Discord voice, because all of the people who I get on here are people who I've GM'd on shows and been in shows with and etc. So they're all so used to being on camera all the time when they're like performing, let's say. And then I'm like, yeah, there's no cameras on this. So they're like, oh, awesome, and then forget and vamp it up for the camera while they're talking, and it's like, wait, no one can see me.
Yeah.
Which is basically hell for any Twitch streamer, creator, etc. No one can see me. God, it's just the worst.
You know, so the thing is, I have a weird. So like, I have a thing. It's a thing.
Right.
People say things about the Twitch world and the streaming world, many of which there's no data to back it up. They just say things all the time.
Yeah.
And I distrust the things they say. They say things like, well, you'll never be popular unless you do X, Y, or Z, or everybody does Y, Z, Q, right? And I was like, is that actually true though? I don't know if that's true. So people say things and I just end up spending too many hours doing research on whether or not these things are true rather than doing my academic writing. It's not procrastination, it's a thing. And one of the things I thought was really fascinating was that recently somebody said, yeah, you'll never be a big stream if you don't have cameras, right? Everybody, you have to have cameras. And I think what started the conversation was actually not about cameras, but about in-person games, like games where everybody's in the same studio versus where they're on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go through the top 10 streams under the D&D category and the top 10 streams under the tabletop RPGs category and just, you know, check. And you would not, I mean, a number of like, of course, Critic Role's #1 under Dungeons & Dragons.
Well, it's not.
#1.
Not in watch time, at least.
No, in watch time it is.
I saw a video of what's his name? Does it begin with an A?
Arcadum.
Like he went on to like Sully Gnome or something to check. You know, he was like going through stuff and it just ended up checking. And maybe it was just in the moment where he checked, but he was above Critical Role in watch time.
Interesting because I check every single week because
Oh,
I'm taking a fairly detailed analytics at the moment because there's something wrong with me.
oh no, no,
And
nothing wrong with you. Just
oh,
we may
oh,
we may take away sharp objects, and we've
mm,
got a nice jacket for you.
oh, good, good, good.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
Arcadum is almost always number two. He's up there.
yeah.
Yeah, I've not yet. I mean, there was that time when Critical Role was not actually streaming, but yeah, he Critical Role
That
beats
that
Arcadum.
that possibly could have been it.
Yeah, but I mean, Critical Role beats Arcadum by a lot, right?
Yeah,
In watch time
yeah,
by all metrics. However, Cellbit, who's number one in over in tabletop RPGs, that category, which is in Portuguese, by the way, in case people want to know,
yeah,
um, is they actually sometimes beat Critical Role. It's interesting, but the whole point is when you look at the top 10 streams in both those categories, there are quite a few that don't use cameras at all, which
yeah.
I thought was very interesting. So everyone's like, "Oh, you'll never be really big unless you have cameras." It's like, well, actually, a number of these channels don't use cameras, so that's not
Mm,
true.
I watched one which had like animated avatars.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
when one of the players is talking, their avatar kind of like bounces up and down a little bit. I can't.
Right.
That may even have been Arcadum. I don't know, but it was really cool, and I was like, ooh, I really like that. It gives me ideas.
And this whole thing started in just again, this whole thing started when I was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and
Hmm.
they were talking about how like the US is like the colonial worst because basically all the streams that happen it's all English dominated, and it was this whole thing about like how the US is the worst. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, but because there's no streams in other languages. Like, well, hold on. So I went and I did my research. And it's true under the Dungeons and Dragons category, English dominates. But although not complete, like the number for this week, the number 5 stream under Dungeons and Dragons is German. The
Hmm.
number 7 is Italian, right? So that's 2 out of the top 10. But if you go to the tabletop RPGs category, um, out of the top 10, 1, 2, only 2 are in English.
Yeah.
All
I'm.
the rest are in other languages.
I mean,
Portuguese, Polish, Italian, Turkish. So like there's actually this huge, vibrant streamed RPG world that's just not in English. It's just that if you don't pay attention to it, you may not think it's there, but they're there and they're doing really well.
mm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing where there was a point like years and years back where I was like, wow, why is English speaking people the only big YouTubers? And then I was like, well, that's probably not true.
Yep.
It's just that
Hmm. Hmm.
I only watch in English because I can only speak English like
Right.
fluently and understand it properly. Although I just due to my huge nerdiness, I can understand a decent amount of Japanese and speak a little bit.
Oh, nice.
That's just because I watch a fuck ton of anime and it kind of
Hmm.
osmosis into my brain.
Hmm. Hmm.
Omoe wa mo shinderu. So
Nice.
but yeah, I actually went out and looked and I was like, oh no, there's tons of
Hmm.
million subs
Yeah.
from every
Yeah.
country because of
Yeah.
course there is.
Of course there
Um
is. And I
yeah.
just like that's the kind of thing I'm like it's funny because I thought about, I would say this is recent, but it's not recent because when I was younger, right, I was thinking about the games that are popular in other countries, right, the RPGs.
Yeah.
Um, so, for example, of course, I knew about Die Schwarze Auge, right, over it being like the number one game in Germany,
Mm,
and how a lot of other countries have a an RPG that is not D&D that is like they're really, really big. Like they like other countries have other RPG communities, right? And
oh
like
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about how even when you're talking about American-based RPGs, it may not be D&D. I know that GURPS was really big in Brazil.
Mm,
Call of Cthulhu is really big in a lot of countries, and of course, the UK has its own RPG ecology, right?
yeah.
With of course 40K Warhammer, but other games as well. And just like thinking about the ways in which like I just think it's really useful to try to realize that the things that we see, like it's like the story, right, of the the four men who can't see the elephant, where they all see like they're all groping on some elephant in a different part of the elephant. Now,
Mm,
in a kind of sketchy way, and they don't realize that it's an elephant they're dealing with, and that if I just want us all to I know that I know that I'll probably never know what the Transylvanian RPG scene is like, but I should know that I don't know it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I should know
yeah,
that I'm only seeing like a piece.
there's a and it's an understandable tendency, but there's a tendency to kind of see what you're seeing and make assumptions without
Mhm.
like like you said, when you think about these things, you go off and research it
Yes.
because you want to procrastinate from other things you're doing.
Yes.
Or not completely, but a little bit.
A little
Um,
bit. A little bit.
and a lot of people just it's like it's probably like all the big YouTubers who are doing face cam
Mhm.
horror games back in the 2015s, etc.
Oh, yeah.
they
Mhm.
they were probably like, there's no way to make it on YouTube unless you do this,
Yeah, 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 yeah. Mhm.
because that's their experience and that's the perspective they see. But if you take a second and just go wandering, like
Mhm.
there was a massive thing around that time as well of let's plays, where it was like
Yeah.
the more videos you release, the better. So you don't need high production value. You
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
need a spewing of content. But if you went back to that time and went wandering around, you'd find big channels that did really, really well with like one video a month. It's just everything about content creation is what works for you, and
Right. Yeah. Mhm.
mixed with luck, basically, and a little bit of Hollywood style is not, it's who you know kind of shit. But,
Yeah,
that's
I
just
think this is like this. I think this is the thing that people don't want to. I mean, I think there are a couple of things that people don't want to confront, right?
yeah,
And that's why you get a lot of, well, the way you make it popular is do X, Y, and Z.
yeah,
But the real truth of the matter is almost no one gets popular, right?
no,
Like nobody actually wants to confront the fact that there's no real good um like well, if you want to become a really huge massive YouTuber and like get partnered and do all these things, then what you need to do is let's say we're talking about TTRPGs. Well,
mm,
you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, you want to have face cams, you want to do this, you want to do this, like these are all the things you should do. But let's be real up front. Less than 1% of all the people who streamed, there was like 36,000 channels that streamed under Dungeons and Dragons or tabletop RPGs last year.
mm.
I spent a lot of time downloading all this data. Don't worry about it. It's fine. About like 36,000, right? And a little
Yeah,
bit less than 1% of those uh made uh so in order to become partnered, you need to have on average 75 viewers, right? On
yes,
average over 30 days.
it's
And
a rough guideline. Yeah.
yeah, because you need if you don't get the 75, you're not gonna get partnered. But even if you do, you may still not get partnered. But like that's the number. It's like it's 75.
Especially
And
if you're on like a big role currently, where it's just like, oh boop, you've suddenly got loads of people.
yeah.
um like they'll
And
reject you first time just to see how you do for a while.
totally, exactly, right? But less than 1% of those channels even made the 75% average,
Yeah.
right? A a Twitter user who does really intense analytics about Twitch in general,
Mm.
and, there's this huge spike in the number of people who were streaming, but not a huge spike in the number of people who got, partnered, and for the last
I'd
quarter.
expect it to dip, actually, weirdly, because like
Oh,
the viewership is spread even thinner than it was already.
oh, yeah, but people are still streaming, right? There's like
Oh
it's
yeah,
like a
yeah.
big yeah, yeah. But, for, Twitch as a whole for the last quarter, like the big pandemic quarter, um, only 0.5% of the people who streamed were partnered.
Mm.
No, sorry, only 0.5% of channels were partnered, and of the people who streamed last quarter, only 0.2% were partnered. So, like, there are a bunch of people who are partnered who aren't streaming. So we're talking about, like, a 0.5% of channels are partnered, right? So this
Yeah.
idea that, "Oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll become a partner." I was like, "Yeah, only 10% of channels are even affiliated." Right? And, like,
Yeah.
the median viewership for, the RPG channels is 3. 3,
Mm.
right? So we have these perceptions of of what it takes to get big, but most people are not big. And like what a big or a small channel is. People are like, "Oh, I only have like 10 people watching my channel. I'm so small." And I was like, "Well, if you have 10 people, you're well over the median
Yeah.
for average viewership because that's 3, right? The vast majority of channels have 2 viewers. You know what I mean? Like
A
like
lot, a
yeah.
lot of people just, and this was even more prevalent on Mixer. But a
Mhm.
lot of
Mhm.
people would just go live while playing, as opposed
Yeah.
to go live to do a stream.
Yeah,
They'd just
that's
be
right.
like, I'm just gonna play this game, and then they go live as well at the same time. It's like there's there's a lot of saturation in
Yes.
streaming,
Yeah.
especially now. Like, I think the funny thing is you've got the you've had the big boom of kind of OnlyFans type stuff, right?
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
so many people want extra income because
Mhm.
they're not working, or they're on like
Mhm.
mm, all the problems with work and etc. that's going on. It's the same thing with streaming. Like, I've been contacted by friends who I've known for ages, and they kind of play Call of Duty every now and then, but they don't really game or anything. And then suddenly they're like, you know what? I'm trying to. They like message me, and they're like, you stream and stuff. I'm like, kind of, yeah, sure. And they're like, what tips do you have on like how to make it a viable thing to do as a job? And I'm like, like, if you want my honest opinion, don't do it, because like it was already pretty damn saturated, and
Mhm.
now
Mhm.
everyone's going to be
Mhm.
sitting around at home and like, hey,
Mhm.
gaming is
Yeah.
easy. I
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
just start streaming, and it's just like,
I
if
mean,
you if
yeah.
you're gonna do it, commit to it. But my general advice is like, if you're going into it thinking, hey, let's make this a viable job, um,
Yeah, it just won't be.
no,
I mean, that's the thing I think about. I think about this a lot, right? Like, I mean, you want to stream, stream, do it. I feel like that's great, but do not think that you'll become a full-time streamer or YouTuber or TikToker because the chances are minuscule. Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like they're minuscule
yeah,
because even if you become a partner, that just means that you have on average 75 viewers at a time. That doesn't mean
for
you're going to
now.
for now,
Like, I
that doesn't
mean,
mean that you're making huge that doesn't mean you have,
yeah.
like, huge you might not have 75 subscribers, you might not, but, like, you know, like, what so then, like, I mean, think about how many partners there are, again, about 1%,
Hmm.
or,
Well,
like, half a percent, right, who probably make, I don't know, 200 bucks every 2 months, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
100 like, that's not gonna pay your rent, and I think that people somehow look at, I don't know, Ninja or whatever, and imagine everybody's making huge amounts of money, but that's not accurate. Like, I mean,
Well,
most people are not gonna make people to make a full-time living. Even the people that you
I mean,
think are, like, famous and big.
yeah, but it's yeah, like, I'm sure you know people as well who are like, you look at them and you're like, wow, they're doing so well, and they're they're
Mhm,
so comfortable with their stream,
mhm.
and how much, and like, if you go into their head, all it is screaming and worrying about money.
Yes. Yeah.
And
And I just
also, I was gonna say, like, Trooper, you have you been around the Twitch sphere for a little while, like,
yeah, about
um
4 years or so,
okay,
4 or 5
then
years.
you've probably experienced this too, where you see someone, and you see them like growing and really pushing. You have
Yep.
that partner push where someone really goes for partner,
Yeah.
and all their community gets behind them, and they're like, yeah, let's get you partner, and they come to all the streams, and then they finally hit that push and they make partner, and then their entire stream just nosedives because
Yeah.
they relax for a second, and they're like, okay, I finally got partner, I can chill,
Yeah.
and then the stream just slowly circles the drain and dies, and you're just like, fucking hell, how did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah. And I was just thinking 'cause, PH reminded me, I've been streaming myself for about 4 years, but
Hmm.
I've been hanging out in Twitch for, like, 5-ish some, 5
Okay.
and some,
Yeah, yeah.
5, 6. Um, yeah, and I just think, and it's the same thing with and I think about this a lot actually because I do music, and it's the same thing. People think, "Oh, yeah, well, I mean, you just some people say, I love the story of there was like the talking about, oh, they're a sellout, you know. All you've got to do is
Mm,
do XYZ and you become a huge massive star. And the thing is, that's not true. Like 90% of all acts that record companies sign make no money ever, right? Like
yeah.
it's you can't like there's no formula that you can do to become like uh, successful in that way.
No.
It's quite random. And I think about for example, people are like, "Oh, this is what you do to be like Critical Role." It's like, yeah, you're never gonna be like Critical Role. And it's the same thing with Dungeons and Dragons. Like Dungeons and Dragons outsells all the other RPGs that and has,
Yeah.
right, since 1970, whatever, whatever. You're just never gonna be Dungeons and Dragons. You should not be aiming to
Well,
be Dungeons and Dragons. That's
yeah.
not really, uh, possible, right? The only company that really got close was Pathfinder doing Dungeons and Dragons, right? You know what I mean? Like, which is which is just basically Dungeons and Dragons. And that's not to like, and when I say that, I don't mean to depress anybody. What I mean to say is that should not be the standard you're judging yourself by, right? You should
No.
think about like, what are the realistic standards you're judging yourself by, and you should think about that. And I think about, I mean, for me, it's one of the things where if people could actually sort of take the outlier out, right? Take out the outlier, just like
Yeah.
do not judge yourself against the outlier. Then you might realize that you're doing really well,
Yeah.
right? That you're actually doing really, really well
And
because,
in
right?
in
If
in
the
fact, like, not even just take out the outlier, take away all outside influence in terms of like what like look at people and go like,
Mhm,
oh, this person's really entertaining.
mhm,
How can I take what they're doing
mhm,
and
mhm,
give myself ideas? You know, obviously
yep,
don't be like, oh, Ninja plays Fortnite, I'm gonna play Fortnite and they'll be say famous. But like more like for example, Stitch of Fate.
yep,
Stitch of Fate is such a cool setup, and
mhm,
immediately when I saw it, I went to Josh and I'm like, I really like this like setup and the post production and stuff. I'ma steal this shit. And and he was like, okay, cool, cool, cool. Like Josh said the same when he was on Sunkissed. He was like, there's some
mhm,
parts of Sunkissed I love. I'm gonna
yep,
steal some of this shit. And I was like, okay,
yep,
cool, 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 cool. Um, but uh, yeah, this is the thing is if you go onto your Twitch and look at your follow list and you see all these people with higher numbers than you,
mhm,
and you're like, wow, why am I doing badly? It's like, no, you're not doing badly.
yep,
They're just doing better. And like
right,
the thing is that has nothing to do with what you're doing.
right.
If you focus on it, all that's going to do is make your content worse because you're going to be
Yeah,
concentrating on the negative.
right.
Um,
And also sometimes it's just like you said, luck. It's sometimes it's
yeah,
just random. You know what I mean?
sometimes
Like
it is so random.
sometimes it's just random and you don't know. And I think about I mean, I think for me, this is just like one of the things I think about a lot. I think that the conventional wisdom is never going to really serve you well, right? So I think about people say, well, you know, if you want to be really big on Twitch, you should probably do League of Legends because that's the most popular game.
Yeah,
But like, how many people are playing League of Legends?
yeah.
I kind of don't think that playing League of Legends is really the way to go because it's
On
so
the flip
saturated,
side,
right?
if you get lucky, it totally
Hmm.
can be.
Yes, right. It can be, right? It can be, but the number one category is just chatting. Like
Yeah,
that's the most watched category in Twitch. People do all sorts of things there, right? And I think it's because it's like you can follow a trend and maybe if you're lucky, that'll get you somewhere, or you can
yeah,
set new trends. Or I mean, in the end, I feel like you should maybe just do what you enjoy, right? Like you should do what you enjoy,
yeah.
uh, because you know, chances are you're not going to get really big. But if you did get big doing something you don't enjoy, well, then you're doing something you don't enjoy. That's no fun. So like,
Well,
like maybe,
I mean, depending. Like, I've seen a lot of streamers who you can kind of take an educated guess that they don't enjoy the game that they're playing anymore, but they're
hmm
still doing really well, and
yeah,
that's when it becomes a job. You know,
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like you're very lucky, even in streaming and content creation, if you actually like super passionate about what you're doing. Like, I love GMing and I love
yeah,
storytelling and I love TTRPGs. It has something for me that isn't contained in video games, which
yeah, yeah,
is like the freedom of imagination where things can kind of
Mhm.
go anywhere.
Mhm.
One of the
Mhm.
problem it's like when you play you remember those old storybooks like Choose Your Own Adventure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You have to choose it's like choose your own adventure, freedom of choice type thing, but you have to choose the options you're given. Whereas
Yeah, that's right.
in a TTRPG, you know, especially in my games, because I love
Mhm.
sandboxes, you can do whatever the hell you want. Basically, it's just like, you
Mhm.
know, um, but it's also like probably the best comparison I'd actually go with is the Telltale games,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
because that like I remember playing the Telltale games, and you know they really, I think one of their problems is they weren't quite honest in the advertising, which is understandable. Advertising is lying. Um,
Or it's hoping, because sometimes the advertising happens before the game is done, and they're
yeah,
like, "We hope it'll be
yeah,
like this."
yeah. This this
Was
this
it
is
Peter
what we're
Molyneux?
aiming for.
That was the Peter Molyneux thing. He's always like, "I'm gonna make this new video game, and it's gonna be like," and you're like, "It turns out it wasn't that." And I was like, "You were hoping. I know
Yeah,
you were.
yeah,
I get it. You wanted it to be that way.
yeah. You tried. You tried.
You tried."
But yeah, I like the first time I played The Walking Dead, the first Telltale game, or like one of the first Telltale games.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the first of that up there of the oh, there was a I mean, it just quite I'm gonna put this in appearance we can talk about
mm,
later. When they came so I, actually have been for years now part of, the visual novel community based out of the program Ren'Py, and
yeah.
people weird gatekeepers, people get all weird, and they're like, "Telltale Games," like, there was this thing like, "Why don't Western audiences like visual novels?" And so I was like, "Well, actually, the Telltale games are visual novels." They're like, "No, they're not." And there was like huge debates about whether or not you should count Telltale games as visual novels. And then of course this like ran into like point and click adventure games. Anyway,
Yeah.
people have a lot of feelings. That's all I'm
Oh yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I tried The Walking Dead first time, and it was, you know, the beginning. You go and meet what's her name? Like the only tolerable child character in a game ever. The hat, Claire?
Uh
No,
Clementine?
Clementine. Thank you. You meet Clementine for the first time at her house, and you have the option of going out during the day or waiting till night. If you go out during the day, I think you meet Glenn and you go off to the farm. If you wait till night, I think you meet like the son of the farmer whose
Yeah.
farm you go to, and you go to the farm. And I was like, where's the fucking choice? Like there is no impact on what happens based on that choice. So
Yeah.
why are you trying to advertise this as your choices matter? Because there's no divergence in the story, like ultimately.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? Because so I feel like your choices do matter in the micro on those,
Oh
but
yeah, yeah,
because
sure, in the micro, but
yeah, but because it's episodic, you have to get to like an end state that will let you to sort of move forward. And
yeah,
I think about this a lot with video games actually about choice and the illusion of choice and what choice means.
mm,
And I think the best I this is my thought. The ones that do it best, which is actually
have
some
your
people
thoughts.
will not recognize this, but for me, the ones that do choice best are the ones wherein, or like the idea of variability, right?
Mm,
Are ones wherein your mind fills in a lot of the gaps,
yeah,
right? So like I'm thinking about so okay, it's that your experience is different
yeah,
based on so I think for me, and this is where I personally, because of the way that I play video games, had a very different experience than a lot of people, and that was with the end of Mass Effect 3. For me, I saw the 3 different endings, red, blue, green, as being very, very different.
mm,
And, because my character like, the way that I'd gone through that game, my character had such a strong sense of, uh, personality and experience and values and thoughts, right? Like, what they thought about the Geth, what they thought about this, what they thought about that, right? Was like it was fairly, like, well developed as I went through,
yeah,
and at the end, for me, those 3 endings were so radically different. Like, they meant such different things. Like, my character would never have gone red or blue, ever, because those were completely unacceptable for my character as that character had developed.
mm,
And so, of course, green was the only choice that made any sense for that particular character. and those endings felt really, really different because of the ways in which um, the game allowed me to sort of create this very personalized extras
Yeah.
around the game, um, and I think about that with like, and I think like if you do it well, even though you all have to get to that final endpoint together, because games can't be infinite, if you do the writing well enough, the player can personalize their experience such that they will experience the same things differently.
Um, I haven't played Mass Effect, so like contextually, I don't know what the choices are and everything. Although
Oh,
I can
I
see a
won't
little
tell
bit
you. I
there.
won't spoil it for you.
Well, what I was actually gonna say is I was super impressed during that little segment there where you managed to very eloquently describe your experience and like highlight your point without doing any spoilers at all.
I try. You
I
know what I
was like,
mean?
I feel like maybe you've done that a few times with Mass Effect, possibly.
I think my I
Just
think
because that
my I
was
think
very impressive.
Thank you. I think my practice actually comes from a Knights of the Old Republic 1, which,
Mm,
there's a spoiler that I would never give away. You
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, there's certain things I was like, "Oh, I can like, there I," because uh, there's a spoiler in Mass Effect 1 that you should like also there's certain video games that have certain spoilers that I would never, ever, ever give away because they're too impactful
mm,
on a person's experience of the game. And so I got really good. I got used to being able to talk around spoilers. So it's like to be respectful of the person who might play it, because I want you to go into Knights of the Old Republic 1 without knowing that spoiler,
yeah,
or BioShock without knowing the spoiler. There are just certain ones that I want you to be able to just experience it without the spoiler. And I don't care how old that game is. You've never played it, and you might. I'm not going to spoil it for you because it's significant and meaningful and impactful. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like there are little spoilers that like it's not going to really impact your experience of the game. And it's funny because there's like a lot of discussion about like spoilers, who likes them and who doesn't. And if somebody says to me, "I want the spoiler," then I will tell them. But otherwise, I want people to be able to experience, right, because certain spoilers are
yeah.
meaningful. That's all.
Or you can say like for the next 2 minutes we're talking about spoilers. Just mute or click
Yeah,
off
yeah,
for a
yes,
second
yes.
and etc. Oh yeah, yeah. It's
Uh,
difficult, especially when you want to talk about specific things. But it's not like we're here to talk specifically about games
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
things. So it's yeah. I liked your method for avoiding spoilers, I guess. However, it has been already 30 minutes of the show, and I haven't actually spoken about anything about what you do and what you're doing and etc. Because I knew this would happen. And I already said to Trooper, if I go off on a tangent or a rant, pull me up and stop me. And Trooper was like, I'm not doing that. I
I'm
enjoy
just gonna
it.
dive right in. I'm just diving
Yeah.
right in.
So what I'm going to say is, Trooper, you run a show called City of Light and Shadow, and it's a
I
bit on the
do.
Fate system.
That is correct. That is correct.
I believe it's set in World War II
Yes.
and kind of centered around the resistance and spying and like is it it's occupied France and etc. Right?
Yes. Occupied Paris.
Occupied
Exactly.
Paris. So
Yes.
my question to you is, if you could be a spy from another country, which one would it be?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now, side note, I when I was in the army, I was a spy. So
Oh, okay.
so I already did that. But if I were to be a spy from a different country that was not the US, do I also get to pick the time frame? This is important.
Sure, sure, sure. For especially for the purposes of the FBI or CIA listening, yeah, yeah.
Right.
The more fancy it is, the better, because then we won't get arrested.
Right, right. Okay. So if I could be a spy from any era, any country, now this will be interesting, right?
Mm.
Because you have to find who. Okay. So I would probably not want to be a spy. Ooh, okay. All right, let me see.
It's interesting,
Time
isn't it?
frames.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because the first off, I have to pick the time period, right?
yeah.
Like, what is the moment that I would want to be a spy in? Um, Here's like spy from feudal England. Ooh. Gosh, I have to hunt you down. So what's interesting is that so here's some things to ponder, right? One is
Yeah.
technology. Like, what kind of role of technology do you want to have in your spycraft? What kinds of things do you want to be able to do? Because we're looking at like how big are computers in your moment, right? How much is your brain power? So I probably would want to be before the era of cell phones, 100%.
Mm.
I would still like sort of radio technology is good. Um, 'Cause I really enjoy some of the spying that you do when it's not all human intelligence, when you can do, like, signals intelligence or
Yeah.
image intelligence, some of that stuff is really fun. Um, so let's see, I feel like it might be kind of interesting to ooh, ooh. Oh, but if you go back far enough, you get to be a bard. Oh gosh,
Yeah,
look at
like, well, or if yeah, I guess I didn't really set it up so that you could be so that you could be like fancy, you know, kind of D&D spy or some stuff, but
oh,
yeah.
okay, so I'm thinking, let's
And
see,
also,
what
the further back you go, the worse spies are treated when they get caught. So that is also another.
that is also fair, but
Yeah.
see, but then if you're good, it might be more easy not to get caught.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
if you still retain the knowledge of someone from
Mhm.
this era,
That
and
would
you were
be
way back when, you know, you'd have an advantage there or a disadvantage, maybe. I don't know. Um.
oh, ooh. Okay, here's what I would do, because 'cause I'm thinking
Yes.
about it. I would go and, this would be like okay, so, alright, let me tell you about what my thought process is, right? So I was thinking about, like, what would be fun to do as a spy, and I was thinking, okay, well, fun times like, invisible ink, and then, like, this kinda stuff would be fun and, like, cool gadgets, whatever, but I was like, "Wait, wait, wait, stop." Rather than what would be fun, I think I would rather go with what would be most impactful, right? Like, where would my work be most valuable, right? If I've got spy skills, what would be not in terms of most fun for me, but where I think it would be the most important work that I could do?
Yeah.
And I think what I would do in that case is I think I would I would follow Harriet Tubman, and I would be a Northern spy in the South during the Civil War.
Oh, so you're keeping it in house. Oh, that's
Mhm.
interesting, and that's a nice way not to betray your country to another country.
Oh, yeah, but also,
Sneaky,
like,
sneaky.
black people weren't citizens at that time, right? So they didn't actually get to count as citizens, they were
Yeah,
property. So, like, I feel like that would I feel like that would still count. I think that would be a good one.
yeah.
Um, I think because I feel like that would be meaningful, or I feel like, if I could be maybe, like, a spy for Haiti in France, like, during the time of the
Ooh,
revolution, that could be really
yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
'Cause I was like, okay, I'd want something where I think it would be meaningful, where I was like, "Yeah, this may suck to be in this position, but what I do in the end, I can stand behind it, I can believe in." You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. I like. It's a shame I can't choose my own country for this question because I really like the SOE in Second World
Mm,
War.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but I would say like for myself, I'll probably just go off the old current day. Um, I think I would go for like, you know what? I'm always one for an underdog.
Mhm.
Maybe I'd be a North Korean spy in Britain because I think
Ooh.
that'd be really challenging.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I mean, you could always go, the route of being of the Oxford spy ring where you're a, one of the Oxford men who just got turned by the Russians,
mm.
in the 40s and
Well,
50s.
yeah, I was considering Russia, but it's like, you know, I don't know, like it's a bit generic to be a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Russian spy in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
double A. I was like, let's go for something interesting. Let's go for something, you know, a bit more challenging. Like Russia has its, I was also thinking like China, but I was like, well, it's just, you know,
You know what might kind of be interesting?
ooh,
A spy in the Renaissance Italian city states. There are all these little different city states that are all in
oh
conflict with each other.
yeah, like
And so
during the Renaissance type.
yeah, during the Renaissance, yeah. So you could
Mm.
be like a spy for one of the Medici's, or like, you know what I mean? Like you could like, and that's a lot of sort of interesting intra-city state politics that could be fun.
You know what's cool? I have a Medici in my vampire game in Sunkist.
Ooh.
Her name is Talia, and she's actually Swiss.
Ah.
But yeah, I love the Medici's and all that kind of like era. So I like she's not from that time period. It's just her name, and you know. But
I actually ran a spy campaign set in Renaissance Florence
Mm,
because I have run a lot of spy campaigns in my life. They've just been in different eras, but I have run
yeah.
a lot of spy campaigns, weirdly. Uh, but that was a good one. That was Renaissance Florence, very low magic, but some very light magic, sort of like magic's on the decline.
Okay.
That was good. That was good. I enjoyed that. Oh,
Mm.
and I ran a
What
30 Years War.
what was that one called so people can look it up? Like,
Oh,
was it a
it's
show?
no, no, it's not online. That was an offline show that I ran.
Well, don't tease people with things they can't enjoy.
Well, but
God.
maybe I'll revisit the concept.
Ooh.
You don't know.
Oh yeah,
But
No, like if you were gonna redo it as a show or like something along those lines, then yeah, we can hype people up for that, and then everyone will be like, I want my because like I think the cool thing for that would be the stealing of technology, kind of like
mhm,
Leonardo da
mhm,
Vinci style technology and stuff like that, and
mhm.
because that was it's the Renaissance, lots of stuff was happening.
Oh yeah. And now Coldrake asked me. See, I'm just to say that I'm gonna blame Coldrake for this.
Oh, go for it.
Coldrake, yeah, Coldrake asked me what the numbers were for Night Witches, which I did on uh, Geek Space TV, which was the first show that I streamed
Okay,
on Twitch, and I don't have those numbers, but I can get them. And now I'm just like, oh, Coldrake, you just put a bug in my ear that I should get numbers, and now I'm going to get them, Coldrake. I want you to know
okay,
I'm
it's
I'm
all
gonna
your
get those
fault.
numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah, Coldrake, it's your fault that that I'm gonna go and look up all those numbers, but I will have them because now I'm interested. Um, yeah, so this is I do love a good, but it's what's so side note. I
Yes.
actually teach a class on spies in music and media in the 60s.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Like
so
in industry spies and
no, music and media about spies.
oh, okay, okay. Because
And
like I could see like just a very very quick sidebar before you jump in.
mhm.
One of my favorite genres of music is like the UK grime drill rap industry.
Oh, nice. Mhm,
Like I
mhm.
love it. And there's a beef that happened recently where one of my favorite artists like had a hullabaloo with another artist, and the other artist released a song where he sent a few like very weak subliminals, and within like 18 hours the other artist had released a full diss track, like responding and replying. And
Uh,
there were so many people who were talking about like he has someone in their camp who gave him like early look at the lyrics or the things and everything. I was like, I can see that kind of stuff happening,
oh,
like
totally. Totally. I mean, think about corporate espionage. It's a big
yeah.
deal, right? Like that's
Corporate X, that's what it's called. Thank you. I can remember what it was called.
oh, but then oh, here's another spy situation.
Mm.
Sports,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
right? Because you get people who want to sort of steal other people's plays and their strategies and
Or just
right.
like analyze them so they can counter them.
Mhm, mhm,
Mm,
mhm.
mm.
Uh, but I know that, like, things like, okay, well, like, I mean, for example, like, okay, well, what setup is that soccer team using? Are they doing, like, 4-4-2? Who's gonna be where? What's their thing? Or, I know with
Thank
football, it's a
you.
big deal.
Thank you for using football as an example. Um,
Oh,
oh, no,
of
it's
course.
you said 4-4-2, and I was like, oh, it's someone who knows, you know, because
I played,
oh, what position?
uh, defense.
Okay,
Come on.
I
Uh,
mean, like my football career was interesting, because I started in midfield
Mm.
because I was very very fast. With like a decent enough stamina to kind of keep going through most of the game. And then I had a growth spurt where I was like 14 and almost 6 foot.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so I was a lot faster than all the other kids. I'd kind of gone through puberty first, and I was also much taller and stronger than all of them. So
Mhm.
they put me in goal because obviously I was bigger. It didn't matter if I was any good in goal.
Mhm.
I could reach like both sides of the goal because I was so
Mhm. Mhm.
big, like comparatively. And then and then they put me in defense because obviously I could strong arm all the other kids
Yeah.
because I was bigger than them. And then when they realized that even though I had shitty shooting ability, the fact that I was faster than everyone else meant that you know when the ball's on in your half, like near your goal, everyone
Yeah.
stands on the halfway line because that's you can't be offside
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
there. So I just used to stand on the halfway line as a striker, and then when we got the ball, they just hoof it over the other side of the pitch.
Mhm.
And because I was so much faster than everyone, every match I'd have like 20 to 30 one-on-ones with the keeper. And even though I was shit, I'd still score like 2 or 3 goals because just law of averages.
Yeah.
And there were some games where the referees would call me offside just purely because they assumed that I was offside because I was
Mhm.
so much
Mhm.
further ahead than the other kids when they like turned around and the ball was kicked. Um, so yeah, that was my football career. That was interesting.
I
Don't even get me started about my rugby career. That was just murder.
Oh.
Um,
Oh.
well, okay,
Uh,
so I'll just very quickly go into it.
no,
Um, I don't know
I
if you,
would just say that I heard that people I used to look, I don't wanna talk about, like, my weird background as an Anglophile,
yeah, yeah.
but, I was watching
I've
rugby.
already picked up hints of it. I won't lie. Um,
Just right, uh, anyway, so but I did go to, I did watch a bunch of rugby, and I had somebody said to me that, rugby is it's interesting. People say like
yeah,
there's a whole discussion about rugby versus versus American
yeah,
football, and there was a really interesting article that I read, and I don't know if it's true. It was by a person who was like a neurologist who said that American football would be safer if they didn't wear padding and helmets like rugby because they make bigger hits, right? Like, they
mm,
just like in American football, they just have bigger hits because they've got all the padding,
yeah.
and this person was also saying that, boxing would be safer
Yes.
if they didn't have the gloves,
Well,
right? Because what the
more.
gloves do is allow you to hit harder
Yeah.
without hurting your fists, but it doesn't help your head when you get hit by it. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but that's
Well,
something I thought was fascinating.
I haven't I looked into it ages back, but because I heard that thing about boxing too, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and from what I remember of what I looked into, uh, there are more deaths now through boxing, and as you said,
Mm,
it's basically because when you don't have gloves and you're just bare knuckle fisting,
mhm, mhm.
um, it's ultimately like you end up hurting your hands, so you can't hit
Yep,
as hard and as you can't go
yep,
as crazy. I will say that like I probably agree that with some time spent, like taking all the padding off on for American football, the problem is the mentality of American football won't change. So
yeah, 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 yeah,
all you're going to do is you're going to take protective
yeah,
gear of people who are
yeah,
going to do the
yeah,
exact same thing, and so
yeah.
it will be worse for a while,
Yeah, yeah,
definitely.
yeah. Now,
But
but the question is though, does rugby have significantly less traumatic brain injuries
yes,
than American football? That's
yeah,
the question.
yeah. Like the way you tackle in rugby,
Mhm.
the way you play rugby is like if you're in American football, you just run into the other person essentially. In rugby, like you can't tackle above the waist really.
Mhm. Mhm.
You go for their waist, you go for their legs, and you bring them down like that. So there's probably quite a lot of like awkward injuries where your arm twists the wrong way, or you
Yeah,
you
yeah.
break your leg or something. But yeah, there's no like head smashing
Hmm.
really. The majority of it is just like, yeah, it's a tackle. You know, you go for their leg, you go for the legs, you kind of like wrap their legs around so they go down. You're not looking to like I think one of the problems also is in America, it's stuff like the derby, the crash derby, what are they
Oh,
called?
Demolition Derby.
Demolition derbies and the monster trucks and stuff. Americans like a show. They like I think one of the reasons why football, let's call it soccer, hasn't taken off as much is because in general you get like one or two goals.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
in American football, in basketball, in baseball, you get home runs, you get baskets, you get touchdowns. Like it's always moving, always scoring, always like big moments. You know, kind of pa 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 like fireworks.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's funny because people say this, right? That's the big thing that people say that Americans. I mean, that's one of the big right sort of complaints about associated soccer, right? Associated football,
yeah,
sort of what we call soccer, is that it's just the scores are not big, they're not big enough, and Americans like all the action. I was like, okay, but they also watch NASCAR. You know, do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah, yeah,
where
yeah,
like
yeah.
where that's just a lot of waiting for an explosion, and maybe it never happens.
But it
But
is also like loud cars going brr.
it is. But I will say that soccer. That I mean, I'm just gonna put out that like our women's soccer team is the bomb, right? Like
Yeah.
soccer does very well in certain segments, right? And in certain spaces, and uh, you know,
Oh
uh,
yeah, yeah, sure. I'm just talking about why it's not. I'm just
oh yeah,
positing why it may not be as popular as it could be,
yeah.
because
But of course,
yeah,
American football is popular, and we only get big numbers in American football because we give like 6 points for a goal. Like
yeah,
I feel like, but no, but also I think it's interesting because baseball is a very mellow kind of a sport in terms
yeah.
of pacing as well,
Well, comparatively,
comparatively.
because we could then go on to cricket and
Right? Which can last for days,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
is amazing.
yeah.
Like, I just think that's amazing. Uh, I do. I just am saying that when I was, because for no reason, when I was reading up on cricket way back in the day when I was in, I don't know, middle school or high school.
Yeah.
Uh, and when I was like, oh, because that like traditional cricket, right before they decided to shorten it for matches, could just last days and days and days. Like, it could just last
Mm, mm.
like if you were playing back, I don't know where you were with your, at Oxford, like you could just go on for like it could theoretically go for weeks.
Oh
Because
yeah.
and like for tournaments, so what is like a test match or like 3-day test matches or whatever. But like the idea that you could have a sport that like could just go on for 7, 8, 9 days, you don't know. That was like so fascinating to me as an idea of like, well, that's interesting. Huh. Like but I suppose at that time it's a bunch of rich people who are hanging out playing cricket, right, on an estate, and they can just, they'll play and then they'll come back the next day, and they'll play some more, and they'll just do that for who knows how long.
Would you like a really random and bizarre posh person fact from me?
Absolutely.
I played cricket obviously when I was at school, at boarding school. um, I bowled a beamer at Prince Harry.
Did you really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Wait, you knew Prince Harry?
I didn't know
I
Prince.
thought it
I didn't know Prince.
I
I
thought
I
it
knew
wasn't true
I
that
knew
all British people knew
people.
the royals.
No, I knew people. I knew people who knew Prince Harry. One of my mates used to go to mixers with him, and he was a bit of an asshole. All things told, like I have a couple of stories about how he would like spit in people's drinks and
No.
then run back to his security.
What?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But like the thing is like when
He was
you
probably also like 20 or whatever, right?
no, this is like 14, 15 teenager kind
Oh,
of shit.
okay. Yeah, 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 yeah,
So like, that's no judgment on who he is
yeah.
now. Although, like I'm sure people still bring up the fact that he dressed as a Nazi once and etc.
He did. That's
Yeah.
true.
It's hard when you're royalty of a nation to kind of get away from that. People will always bring that shit up. Um
Yeah.
but hey, whatever. Live and let
I
live.
don't I don't envy them.
Mm, Me neither. Although, like, it is. You know what? So, Trooper
Yes.
runs a TTRPG channel. I felt myself going off down another tangent, and I was like, no, I want to talk about my rugby, but I'm not letting this happen. I'm gonna be a good host and keep things on track.
Fair.
So have you you run some TTRPGs on your channel?
Yes.
And also I know you do Divinity origin, is it Divinity 2?
We're doing the first one right now.
The first
yeah,
one with the little red dot, who is
Yes.
also on the last ditch.
Yes. And awesome. I do basically I do theoretically my schedule is on Thursdays I do a game on the Mac that is Mac compatible.
Okay.
Uh and then on Saturdays I play something on the PS4 and then I run my RPG on Fridays. And I try to do with Dot Sundays for Divinity Original Sin
Mm,
and what is developed, but again, we people who know me uh, will know. So what I started doing is I would play all of the games that were nominated for excellence in narrative from the
mm,
Independent Games Festival,
mm,
and for the year. And I did that. It's just that I sometimes take a while to finish a game. If a game says like if how long to beat says the game is like 10 hours, it will probably not take me 10 hours to finish it. It will probably take me hours.
oh,
And
sure,
so
sure, yeah.
yeah, so it got to a point where it was like 2020, and I was still playing the 2019 games, and so I think for the last year, which was I'm pretty sure I did 2020, although actually I believe I just did the finalist, the one that won, and so I'm kind of behind a year, but we'll we'll get there. But so like I'll do things like that. I tend to go for really story heavy games that will sort of make me super sad, and
Sure,
or
sure.
like super emotionally invested, something like that.
Have you
And
played the Banner Saga yet?
no, but I do have it, and I'm like, oh, I should play that. What am
Banner
I playing
Saga
right
is
now?
really good.
Well, I'm playing out the Long Dark at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Is yes, I'm playing the Long Dark at the moment, and that's been good. Um, but oh gosh,
Have you woken up to an angry bear or wolf yet?
no, not yet.
Okay.
But we just started episode 2, and there are now bears. And the character that I play is a real whiner. He
Oh.
gets mad that I make him carry way too much stuff because I'm
mm.
a bit of a hoarder. And I'm like, you should maybe stop complaining. And he's like, but I can't run when wolves are chasing me because you've got me carrying too much stuff. And I was like, yeah. Anyway, he complains a lot.
Not I don't know how much the Long Dark has changed since I played it, and I'll avoid like anything that could possibly be a spoiler or anything. All I'll say is I remember playing the Long Dark and being like, oh, shelter, and I fell asleep in a place. And then I woke up to a wolf chewing my arm off because it was the wolf den where I'd chosen to sleep. So
Oh,
I was like,
oh,
this will make a great base camp for this part of the survival story, and I chose poorly. So yeah, that's the thing.
Oh, well, so far, mostly it's been chat being like, you need to drop the things you're carrying. You're
Yeah,
carrying too much stuff. And then I don't. Uh, because, what if I need it? I guess
yeah.
that
There
might be a thing.
there are two things that can always show you a gamer, which is loot like hoarding. So
Hmm.
if you're playing a game where you can loot stuff, you hoard everything, even if you don't need it, because you might need it later.
Yeah.
The other one is touching stuff. I have an idea for a game. Yeah. I have an idea for a game which is Escape the Room, where
Okay.
you spawn into the game and there is like panels and buttons and like things to look into, and there's all of this stuff you can unlock lockers and find keys and find codes and all of that type of thing. But the secret is that the doors open and you can just leave. Because you get presented immediately with all these buttons and stuff, and I could hear from your laughing. if you spawn a gamer into a situation like that, they're gonna touch all the buttons. Like the second you start
Yes.
touching buttons and stuff, the door locks.
Yeah, they will all the buttons, all the
Yeah,
buttons.
yeah. So that's the thing, is the way to escape the room is just don't push anything. And for a gamer, that is impossible. You want to see what stuff does.
Oh, so many thoughts about all of this. I just,
Yeah.
ooh. Yeah. Yeah.
You could maybe even translate it into a TTRPG.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, but then again,
Yeah.
don't we already do that all
Yeah.
the time?
Yeah.
I'm just like, here's a box, and they're like, oh, we should get the box, and I was like, well, should you? And usually the answer is yes.
Okay, here's a question, because we're both GMs,
Yep.
as well as being players and role players and everything. Have you ever like offhandedly mentioned something just as like a little bit of flavor to a situation where you're like you're walking down the street and on the other side of the road there's like there's like a telephone box, and they're like, ooh, telephone box, and they spend like the next 30 minutes to an hour trying to figure out how to approach the telephone box without anyone seeing, and to get it, because obviously there's something super interesting about this telephone box, and you're just like, no, look, and you're like you're like spraying water on them. You're like, shoot, get off the telephone box. There's nothing in there. I said it as just a bit of flavor for the world. It's literally nothing.
But sometimes they just want that telephone box.
I know.
That sometimes
I
happens.
know. And like it does, especially if you're not running something that has like a time frame, and because the way I run Sunkist, and my viewers can tell you this, like very often, but they'll just end up role playing for 3 hours. Like, not really much progression, because it's very, very slow burn. It's very, very chill. There's no kind of like, let's get this done a lot of the time. So
Right.
I'm always happy for them to go off on tangents and things. I just find it funny, when you're a GM and you're like, oh, there's this thing, and then they try and figure out why it's there, and you're like, there's no reason for it to be there. I literally just said it as like a little bit of flavor, setting the scene and stuff. But it's there. It's got to be something. There's a mystery, and I'm like, there's no mystery. Okay, fine. It's a transformer. You happy? You figured out my dastardly plan. Optimus Prime has been spying on you this whole time. It's like, in Vampire the Masquerade? Yes. Okay. If it'll get you moving, yes.
It's it's funny because I was just I was thinking about sandboxes, right? And I was talking to somebody who basically who I just don't actually think has ever really experienced a sandbox,
Yeah.
and they were like, well, 'cause I said something about sandboxes, and somebody's like, well, but aren't all RPGs sandboxes? I was like, no.
No.
And they're like, well, but like you can always make choices in any RPG, so like all RPGs are sandboxes, and I was like, no, no. And they said, well, and so then, as they were asking me questions to sort of try to get at this, I was like, yeah, you're not getting one. So like, well, but I mean, look, if you're running a game and your players decide to go and sit and like just talk for like an hour, you're going to have like guards come in and do something. I was like, no, like if I'm doing a sandbox, the answer is no, right? I'm only going to have guards come in if the guards would come in. And
Yeah.
like, I think the person is like, what they're thinking about is having choice within a set structure, and they think that's the sandbox. But
Yeah.
a lot of people, it's funny because I was
Well,
thinking about, like, what is a plot, right? And for me, the difference between a sandbox and a game that is more traditional or whatever is
yeah.
how one conceives of a plot, right? Or wasting time.
Well,
What is considered wasting time or not wasting time, right? Those
so
sorts of things.
so just to use my Sunkist as an example, in Sunkist, the plot is essentially that one night all of the elder vampires, all of the elder kindred, burst into flames spontaneously together.
Awkward.
And then all of the ones who survived that ran away and left the younger kindred in the city. So it essentially turned into a like lawless warlord territory. Grab as much territory as you can, fight each other. They're all the same young kindred age, a few decades or so. Because I wanted I wanted to run a VTM campaign without the power structure. I wanted to see what people would do and how things would go. But the story of it is the fire. Like that was the setting for the show, and my players, because they were so busy like grabbing territory and defending themselves from the other factions and all the intrigue and all the other stuff, like they have found out what happened, but only like on the side, you know, like as they're doing other things. They never followed that story, that like hook, and like went deep into it. You know, they never hunted down the people who did it and killed their sire slash mentor.
Yeah.
Because it's a sandbox, you know, like I have all of these different hooks and storylines and side stories and stuff that they get presented with, and they have options to go down. And so like that, it wasn't the main story, because there is no main story, just the characters are the main story.
Right.
But yeah, they never kind of went down the whole burning of Elder Kindred and figuring out exactly why it happened and how they could like avenge or stop the people who did it or anything. And you know, that storyline kind of carried on for a bit and then moved on. Like it's we're getting towards the end of the campaign now, but yeah, it just you know, a lot of the people involved in the whole burning moved on, and they're not there anymore, and so
And I think it's you know, it's about, I mean, for me it's a lot about what counts as story, right? And what
yeah.
counts as
Ooh,
plot,
I
right?
sorry, just very quickly.
No,
Uh,
yeah.
I would also say, because we've been talking about it, so someone who maybe hasn't played a sandbox but but like feels like they have, one thing that is a nice way to highlight it is, as a GM, if you want a railroad, you can make a railroad very easily, but make it seem like you have choices. So you could say, like, you're in a dungeon, you're walking through a hall in a dungeon, and you get to a fork in the dungeon. One goes left, one goes right. Which one do you take? As a GM, it could lead to the same place. You know, so you've prepared a room, you've prepared an encounter, and we go left, and that's exactly the same encounter. But you know, because you don't go down the other side, you never know what's down that side, and so it's just the same option on both. So
Yeah, you know, Dow Nomad says that they much prefer campaigns where the characters and the environments they encounter drive the story more than pre-scripted bits.
yeah,
And one of the things I would say is, in my experience, um, a lot of players think they want sandboxes, but they don't.
yes,
Um, and partly it's because they often don't have the skills to do a sandbox. They've actually developed skills for other things. Like
yeah,
there's actually a whole set of skills to do um, a more traditional game, right? Like there's skills that involve um, anticipating what the hooks are, knowing you should take that. Like there's a whole, but like you know, like in a there's like it's like a dance, right? Like when I think about a a traditional game. I think of a traditional game being like social dance, like doing a waltz or something like this, where there's a lead and the follow, and the players are the follow. And really good players understand, you know, how to follow well, and they're able to sort of improvise within their following, make it seem really fun. And the GM does the same thing. And
yeah,
so when you start off the campaign and you walk into that tavern, and there's a mysterious person with a cloak in the corner, those players have developed that skill. They know they're supposed to go talk to that person in the corner. Like
yeah,
they know it, and then they do, right? And like there's a way in which you all, and if you do it well, you get this really epic story. But the sandbox puts a lot of responsibility on players, and players don't always want that responsibility, right? You know what I mean? Like, because it's a lot of work. Because the
yeah.
thing is, the GM won't give you the big epic story. You have to do it, and some players, that's just a lot of work. And
It's a
you
lot
know,
of like
yeah.
thinking and you know, if you if your GM puts you in a room with a box and a key,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to use the key to open the box because the
Right.
GM has mentioned it, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
if
Yes.
you get put in a room with a bed, with a table, with
Yeah.
chairs, with like multiple closets with clothes in, all the clothes are like greens and purples and blues
Mm-hmm.
and like some of them are like bedazzled with jewels, and you know, like there's 5, 6 different lights with different colors. Then when it gets to that point where you've got all of this stuff around you, you can't go, oh, the GM wants me to X. You have to go, you have to start questioning everything and start, and a lot, especially even in shows in a different way, you don't want to hold up the narrative of a show, especially when you have other players who also want to do their own things. So very often you'll look for the thing that you're supposed to do so that you can do
Hmm.
it. And
And this, yeah,
that it's a really interesting mentality because I find myself having it as a player too.
right. But it also comes down to what is the story, right? And I think this is the, like I was talking to somebody about this, right? About who very much is, I mean, so for example, we have all been trained to expect stories to go certain ways,
Mm,
right? This is part of our training, you know, that we read stories and watch films and TV and all this stuff. And there's a certain way and a certain kind of pacing and certain things we expect from stories, right? So
yeah,
things like, you know, you start in the beginning and then you get rising action and then you get your climax, you get your denouement. There's like a way in which we understand stories, and that is satisfying for us.
yeah,
And the thing about a sandbox game is that you may not get that.
yeah,
And so for many people, a sandbox actually may not be satisfying narratively because they're like, the story didn't work. And I was like, well, see, that depends on what you imagine a story being.
the
Um,
just
right,
to
right. So,
insert
like for
very quick.
example,
Oh yeah,
so for example, and I think this is where you can really get some of these things that if you have a villain who's your nemesis,
mm,
you kind of don't want to like one shot them in episode 2. That messes up the story. Like you want to have them at the big climax at the end, right?
yeah,
You don't want your hero to be killed by a janitor in episode 3. They have to build like and so we have all of these ideas of how the story has to go. In a sandbox, it just may not go that way. And
yeah,
so um you have to be a player who and a GM who's able to let go of your preconceived notions of what a story is supposed to be like,
yeah,
or it may not actually be very satisfying or fun for you. But if you can let go of that idea of what a story is supposed to be like, you can get stories that you might not have expected. And
yes.
some people will not like them, and some people will. But that's the that's the interesting thing for me. But I also recognize that it is not actually fun for lots and lots of
And
people.
it's not for everyone. Like
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
we can actually use the last ditch a little bit. What we're
Mhm,
currently doing as an example, where it's like you like if you watch the last ditch, that the last episode that Trooper was on, you can see Trooper like a kid in a candy store with all of these like military options and like tactics and strategies and stuff.
mhm,
Um, there's like and there's no criticism in play style or anything like this, but
mm,
there's a couple of moments in the last ditch where you can see the focus was on the main goal I gave you guys as players,
mhm.
where it's like, oh, the tunnel, we'll go directly to the tunnel and figure out the tunnel. And like that's not wrong or anything, but like just to use you as a shining example, Trooper. Sorry about this.
That's fine.
Like Trooper was like, let's go to the quartermaster, because A, we can replace the quartermaster maybe and slip in and etc. Or B, quartermasters know a lot of shit, so we can probably question them and find out a lot of stuff. And I was like, that's such a good way to like get into the info and
Mhm.
start the spying and stuff like
But
um
also, hey, we might also be able to take care of the tunnel that we might be able to get at the tunnel in a sideways
yeah,
way. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and I think that there's a, I mean, you know, and I think about this with back in the day, right? So, uh, I remember I was playing a 3.5 game, right? D&D 3.5, and D&D 3.5 made it very explicit that you could get XP for not killing things, which was not the case in first and second edition. That you know, that if you were able to sort of like get around the monsters, that you could get XP as well. And I remember we had this whole incident where we were going. We were like second level characters at this point in time, and we just made second. And like
Mm,
basically the whole thing is that there were some bad guys. We chased the bad guys, some goblins, whatever. They had an invitation on them where basically some huge massive warlord was inviting all like the bad guy groups to come and have a big old meetup like Coachella,
yeah,
where they would talk about stuff. We're like, oh, we should probably go find out what's going on. So we like sneak out there. We find out the big warlord's like, hey, all you disparate groups of various monster types, let's make a big, huge, massive army and like do all the invading. And we're like, that's bad. So we were like, let's sneak back out. And on our way out, we come across like a platoon of like trolls
mm,
and my character had some like persuade, so like, let's lie and say that we're also bad guys and we're just like on our way. And so like we did it. We successfully like fooled them. So we didn't have a fight. And we started leaving. And one of the other players said, oh, but we didn't fight the trolls. I was like, yeah, they're trolls. We're second level. We'll all die. And they're like, and there's also like 15 of them. And they're like, yeah, but we're not going to get the XP if we don't kill them. I was like, we really don't. And then so they started the fight and it was a TPK. But the
yeah,
point is that like we get these patterns of what we think we're supposed to do,
yes,
and we just sort of follow these patterns. And oftentimes those patterns serve us well because we are supposed to do those things. But sometimes we don't have to follow those patterns, but we don't know it yet. You
yeah.
know?
Well, one thing, I haven't really GM'd D&D that much. What I would myself personally probably do for D&D is kind of selective XP, like essentially I wouldn't give you XP per combat encounter. You know, like
Hmm.
for killing a monster you don't get XP. It would be probably session based
Hmm.
or like even time based, like how much
Yeah.
kind of experience you've gone through gets you
Yeah.
experience essentially, because that's one of my gripes with D&D, and it's just because it's the guidelines, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It encourages you to, and for me, I'll use Sunkist as another example. At the beginning of Sunkist, they ran into a character who was very clearly dangerous. um do you know much VTM? I don't know how much you've played.
Yeah. Played a whole lot of VTM
Okay.
back in the day, but I basically did not I did not upgrade to VTM second edition revised
Hmm.
because that's when revised is when they introduced Metaplot,
Okay.
and my group did not like Metaplot, so we kept playing second edition until basically we no longer could because all the new players all played second edition revised, and so there was there's a
Yeah.
moment where if you stay with the old edition you will no longer get new players, and so we played until we basically aged out is what ended up happening.
Okay. So yeah, basically, the NPC was a Bruja.
Hmm.
And he it wasn't super strong. He was like semi decent at brawling and melee, etc. You know, he was okay. The thing about him was is he was super fast, super agile, and he had a spark of rage.
Hmm.
So he could make so like you couldn't catch him, you couldn't hit him. He was really annoying as a like he was basically what I call an instigator. Like
Hmm.
he would say the thing that would annoy the players or the characters he's interacting with all the time just for fun. Um and yeah, Clay. And when they turned up, it was to two gangs killing themselves. Like basically being forced to fight each other because he was using Spark of Rage to start fights, and then
Hmm.
they'd start fighting and killing each other. Um, and when we started Sunkist, I basically said to them, "Look, this is an actual sandbox." And I think this is like for anyone who ever wants to run a sandbox or play in a sandbox, always keep this in mind. Encounters don't mean fights.
Hmm.
You want when you're playing in or when you're running a sandbox, but when you're playing in a sandbox, keep it in mind. When you're running a sandbox, tell your players that you are putting characters, NPCs, encounters in front of them that will just straight up kill them if they decide to fight, because
Hmm.
that's what makes a sandbox is the options to get to an encounter and not have to fight and have to try and think of other ways out of it. Obviously I never roadblock my players. I
Mhm.
don't put a character in front of them that is just the evil necromancer who's gonna kill them,
Right.
because that's no fun. And invariably, the nice thing about bad guys is they like to monologue and hold things over people. So you also have the option of like, "I'll let you live today," Mwahaha, evil laugh, and then cloak sweep. Um, but yeah, like it's always important. And this is just, oh God, we're going off on another tangent.
It
Um,
happens.
it does. This is just a good DM tip or GM tip, I guess. When you have an idea for a show or for a campaign or whatever, gather your players around and tell them what to expect. Tell them what you want to do, find out what they want to do, and kind of amalgamate that into a campaign and into a game. Because if you're a GM and you have an idea for a show or for a setting where you're like, I really want to do a World War II game
Mhm.
where it's like, going through the horrors of war, and
Mhm.
going through the slog, and the dropping D-Day and dropping into
Mhm.
France,
Mhm.
and like just the cold and the hunger, and everyone else is like wanting to be Arnie
Yep. Yep. Yep.
in like an Arnold Schwarzenegger action film. You're immediately going to run into this horrible
Yes.
clash of like perspectives
Yep.
where no one has
Yep.
fun.
Yeah. I think so. In my opinion,
Yeah.
in my opinion, one of the reasons why Dungeons and Dragons is so popular,
Yeah.
uh, but also one of the things that makes that one of the sort of, in my opinion,
Makes it kind of skin deep a little bit, maybe.
no, one of the negative, echoes, one of the negative
Yeah.
effects of the way that Dungeons and Dragons works, but what makes it very popular, that one has to be conscious of, that people are not conscious of, like, it can be overcome, but you have to know it, is that one of the reasons why D&D works so well is because everybody knows, quote, unquote, "knows" what the game is going to be before you start, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that, um, you're like, oh, if I say to you, hey, you want to play a game of D&D? I can say to you, yeah, make a first edition, make a first level character, and you can make a first level character and not talk to any of the other players or talk to me. And you come in, you make your character, you've got a first level paladin, that's cool. And everybody walks in, they play a game. You know that you're going to basically be going to like maybe some dungeons, kill some creatures, get their stuff, level up. Like the framework is implicit. Everyone understands that
Mm,
you don't need to have those conversations. Now, I would say probably still should, but
well,
because
yeah,
but D&D
and
is set up in a way that people can jump in
mm,
and kind of know what they're getting, but that is not the case with a lot of other games. But
yeah,
many players and GMs have never developed the skills of having those conversations. I have
yeah.
been in a number of games that were not D&D where they fell apart because what the expectation of the game is different. Specifically, a lot of cyberpunk games
Mm,
where the GM had an idea of deadliness, it was not the same idea as the players did, or we didn't have a discussion about tone or what we were doing, and it didn't work. And the thing is, you have to know that that's a conversation that maybe you need to have,
yeah.
but because D&D um, takes care of that for you in the beginning, a lot of people have never actually had that conversation. And when I'm doing a spy game, because they're two radically different spy models, right? There's the really, really high powered cinematic James Bond kind of spy where you crack some jokes,
Mm,
all that stuff happens. And then there's like
True
the spy who
Lies.
came, yeah, True Lies. But then
Mm,
there's like that kind of downbeat spy, like the spy who came in from the cold, where it's or where it's like miserable and sad and gritty. And like if you're expecting James Bond and I give you Spy Who Came from the Cold, it's not going to work as a campaign. So
yeah,
these are conversations in terms of like, do you want this to be comedic? Do you want it to be serious? Like there are a lot of conversations that are really, really good to have in order to make your campaign successful
yeah,
that people have not had practice in having because D&D takes care of that for you for the most part. And it's not bad that D&D takes care of it for you because it means that a lot of people can play D&D really successfully and have it work pretty well because everything's set up like, I mean, I think about the ways in which class and level in D&D, like, every single class in D&D is a combat class.
Yeah.
So, everyone's gonna be able to do something in combat, but if I'm running GURPS, for example, and I don't have a conversation with you
Mm.
about what we're doing, you could make an accountant who has no combat skills, but I was planning on having, like, a pirate game where there's combat every session,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's awkward, right? So we have to have the conversation, "Hey, in this game, is there gonna be combat? Is there gonna be a lot of social things? Does social class matter?" Like, there are all these kind of conversations you have to have in a lot of other systems, especially ones with more open character creation, that a bunch of people have never had the practice having those conversations, and they're important.
Yeah, and I think that is partially, as you said, like on D&D, not like to put blame on, but
No, it's like yeah.
it's just something that has happened because of how D&D is, where like a lot of people get into it's like their gateway drug, and very
Yeah.
often they kind of stick at the gateway and they just play D&D, and because it's kind of the same thing every time. Speaking for myself, I have two D&D ideas, which I'll tell you after the show's over.
Ooh, nice.
um I've got two D&D ideas that are very, very different and weird, and would require me to have conversations with my players,
Yeah.
obviously. But that's just me. Like, I don't like, I don't think I would ever go, hey, let's play D&D, and then it's like Dungeons and Dragons. That's
But
that's
which is
that's
totally
just me.
fine. Like, it's totally
um
fine. That's also fine. It's just one of those things where, like, oh, we should, it's I just think it's good practice
yeah.
to have a conversation about
Well,
expectations.
because we were talking about before how if you're a GM and you mention a thing, very often your players will be like, that is an important thing because the GM mentioned it. The GM wants me to do X, you know?
Mhm, mhm.
And that, like, that's not how I run my games, and that's not how I sandbox. So I'll put like superfluous things out there. We're going back to superfluous as a word because I like it.
Yes,
I'll
yes.
put superfluous things out there that have no bearing or importance, but they're there for color. They're there to set the scene and to make you feel like you're in a world. One of the things that my players keep doing, which makes me laugh more than panics my entire being to anxiety and dread, is they're like, so for Sunkist, I set up the world for like, I did about a month or 2 months of prep before the show. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff in Sunkist that the players and the viewers haven't seen because they happened and disappeared, and the players didn't hit the they didn't get it, they didn't never found it, they never experienced it, it just happened and moved on. um so yeah, like, my players will talk to a random person, or like ask about a random thing that I've just mentioned, with the assumption that I've got all of this back. So Vandy, OMG Vandy, was having a date with one of the NPCs, and luckily, like, I'd figured that he was going to be important at some point, so I'd written out a lot of his backstory and stuff. But part of what I said just off the rip was that he was interested in philosophers, like, Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers and stuff. And immediately she was like, "Oh, who's your favorite philosopher, and what do you like about them?" And
Right.
it was because she felt so much like it was just a breathing, living world, that she was like, I'm sure Sheepy has this already, like, this is already a thing, kind of thing. And so I had a little bit of panic where I was like, God, I've got to think of fucking philosophers now. And I ended up going with Cato because the guy was a gangrel, and Cato is very, like,
Yeah.
anti-establishment. Well, he was very democratic, and um, but yeah, like, that's something that you don't really get in D&D, or you.
Well, you can.
Yeah, I
It's just
think.
that you have to, like, think about again, it's about these sort of, expectations, right? And the thing is you
Yeah.
can get a lot of different things, you just have to know it. I was thinking about this in terms of, so one like, so for example, if I'm running like, the last time I ran, a cyberpunk game,
Yeah.
I had to have a conversation with the players. about a thing that I needed them to know because they were coming from a bit more of a
Mm,
traditional
mm,
background, and I was running this a lot more sandbox, and they did not know what that meant, so I had to tell them, and what that meant was, "You're going to be given the opportunities for missions, and it's okay for you to say no."
yeah,
Like when the
yeah.
fixer's like, "Here's a mission for you." Very often players from a traditional background will think, "The GM wants me to take this mission, so we're
Mm,
going to take the mission. If we don't
mm,
take the mission, we're sort of being bad players." But like some of those missions, they probably should not have taken, right? You know what I mean? I said, "Look, it's okay for you to say no to missions that are offered. Like you're not disappointing me as a GM. I'm not going to be mad. Some of the missions are going to be good for you. Some of them are going to be bad. Like this is up to you." And I had to really let my players know that it was okay for them to say no because they're used to basically just saying yes, because otherwise, oh, they're gonna like mess up the story, right? Because
yes,
like I've
yes,
planned a story for them and they have to say yes. But I was like, look. Some of the people who offer you missions are gonna be sketch, and maybe you don't want to do them. Maybe you do. It's up to you. You know what I mean? But like you have agency that you can say no. But if you never tell them and they're not used to being able to say no, they're gonna feel pressured, right? To do the mission because they don't, because they're like, "Oh, my GM probably spent all this time prepping this one mission, and so we better say yes, or else, that we're not being fair." And if you're playing a more traditional game, I really appreciate players who do that because,
yes.
yeah, you know what I mean. But it's one of those things you just have to let them know that in this game, it's okay. It's okay for you to say no and do whatever you want to do.
Communication is
Yeah.
key.
Hmm.
And it avoids a lot of like awkward conversations and awkward situations, and especially something which I'd never heard termed before, but it's how I term it, which is like uh roleplay dead ends and basically cornering yourself in roleplay. Like it's very very easy when you create a character and you get into a character to suddenly find yourself dead ending the narrative because you're like, oh, I need to do X, which is what the GM expects me to do and what
Hmm.
would progress everything. You know,
Hmm.
it's like if you're playing Rogue Trader, for example, and you make a character who hates authority and will always like rebel against authority. You're in the 40k universe. You have a rogue trader who's captain of your ship. They are the authority, and then you've made a character who will never. I had a player once who made a character who was a loner,
Hmm.
who didn't like to interact with the rest of the party, and then
Yeah.
got upset when they were left out of things. And it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's like we all knew what the show is. I told you how everything
Well,
works, but you've managed to develop this character into a place where you don't enjoy playing them because they're not involved because of the role play. And speaking,
well, I'm just gonna say that this is where
yes,
I am uh, I am a very like I'm a kind of a tricky GM in certain ways,
yeah,
and specifically, I say no. Right? I say no. People always say GM should never say no, always say yes. But
no, no,
be,
yeah, I agree. I
people say
agree
it.
with you. Oh
People
yeah,
say it.
people definitely say it, but
They do say it.
it's a slogan as opposed to a rule. You know.
Oh, people follow it too. And the thing is,
Okay.
once we get into the game, I say yes pretty much all the time because we're in the game now.
Yeah.
But I say no at character creation. Like
Oh yeah.
if I say, "Hey, players, do you consent to play a game where we are all members of a baking team and everybody bakes together in like a big, it's like an Iron Chef campaign." And everyone's like, "Yes,
And then
we all want to play in an Iron Chef campaign where we're all member of a baking team." And I said, "Great." And then everybody makes their characters, and one person's like, "I want to play a person who hates food and is only here to stab all the other players." And I say, "No, you can't play that
or
character." Like
or
I
like
like if yeah.
or the people who like have a brain spark of this would be really cool, and they go, I'd like to be gluten allergic to gluten, and you're like, Don't do that."
but once we start, you can do whatever. If I'm playing sandbox, once we start, you can do whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'm not. But like I'm here to set us all up for success, right? And I also think about a lot of like because I recruit for campaigns specifically. Um, I say, do you want to play in a game like this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if you say yes, we that's part of the social contract, and we should be playing together, right? And
yeah.
if the idea is that we are all uh yeah, like they're just like, you have to play the game,
You
right?
you
Like you
you
have to play the game that we're playing.
invariably, unless you get, I won't call them a bad GM, but unless you get a specific GM who has like a bee in their bonnet, your GM is going to adjust for you. The least you can do is adjust for the GM and the other
Yes,
players to
yes,
make the game
yes,
fun. So don't
yeah,
like if you go in and you're like, oh, I'm playing a 40k game, I really want to play a commissar. If that doesn't work for the setting, if you're all playing fucking orcs or
hmm
something,
hmm
don't insist that you're a
yeah,
commissar, because that's not going to be fun for anyone because it won't make any sense and people will be
yeah.
like spun out. And speaking of being set up for success, Trooper, you in the future soon, I don't like. Has it been announced the next one of the next things you're GMing over on another channel?
Yes,
So you can
yes, it
you can
has.
talk about it for like 2 to 3 minutes
I can.
because I have to go to the lavatory.
Oh, well then, you should just go,
Yeah.
leave.
Well, I wanted to set you up for success so
See,
you can talk
see,
about your
see,
awesome
see if
stuff.
we care.
Um.
Just see if we care. They're just leaving us. We
Well,
don't care.
I'm going, and also sidebar. I specifically used lavatory for you as an Anglophile. I hope you
Oh,
appreciated that.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I did. I am going to start a new 6-part miniseries that is over on Table Story, and it's starting this Saturday, which I'm so excited about. I did a little dance, you couldn't see it. The game is called Midsummer Mysteries, and it is using the Clockwork Dominion system. And Clockwork Dominion is it's like a I'm gonna call it an indie game, but I don't mean that in terms of like the aesthetic of an indie game. I mean that in terms of like it's independent creators. And one of the writers is a friend of mine, and it is a steampunk game. I believe the subheading of the game is it's Clockwork Dominion, steampunk fantasy in a Victorian Gothic horror world. So my friend who worked on it, she's a historian as well. So uh, what they did is it's steampunk, but it does have supernatural elements, sort of horror supernatural elements in it. Uh, but and also has a lot of steam tech. But the idea is they don't really use anything that did not exist in the time period, at least theoretically. They just so for example, there are computers because there was the Babbage, right? The Babbage engine. There were people who made robots at that time. So a lot of the kinds of robots and all the things that existed are things that existed at the time, either in a prototype or in the imagination, but they just made it, bigger and more widespread. They also have um, they don't have, like, elves and dwarves and things like that, but what they have are the things that people imagined at the time, so they have fae, but fae within that time frame could be a lot of different things. It could be the sort of fae that you see, like the she, right? Who, maybe aren't that friendly. Like, you don't wanna have dinner at their court because then you're never leaving. Red caps, these different kind of creatures, in a global sense. They also have, Nephilim, which are the
Ooh.
children so, like, you can't be a fib, but you can be a changeling, right? Which are, like
Mm.
because, half fae, half human. You can be Nephilim, which are, like, the human angel offspring of the fallen angels. You can be Beastmen, which is all, like, Island of Dr. Moreau. So you've got these sort of different options, but it's very much set in it has the ideology of the time period. So the whole sort of setup is that in the belief of the system, right? Um, Before the world was created, there was chaos called the Pontus. And that is just chaos. And then the clockwork god came and created the clockwork. So created the system that we all created order. and order is good, order is great. And it's 1896, and at this point in time, the clockwork is beginning to break down. So all of these strange events, chaos is coming to retake the world little by little. And of course, if you ever read any of, if you're a fan of weird supernatural things, the paranormal, if you read anything like the Book of the Damned by Charles Fort, who collected all of these newspaper accounts of weird things, like like when it would rain blood or it would rain frogs, or people sort of disappear and show up other places, like Casper Hauser. All like there's a lot of weird things that happened in the 19th century, etc. And so these things happen in this world, but these are evidence of um, chaos, the Pontus sort of taking over the world. And at this moment, no one really knows why. There are people who are like, well, it's the British Empire, and if we have a really strong British Empire, we can conquer the world. We'll control chaos, and that's really good. And all these people who want, equal rights and to destroy our structure are like they're agents of chaos and they're bad. Other people are like, well, hold on a second. We think maybe the reason why the Pontus is coming is because this system is super corrupt and oppressive and is creating bad things. And so, like, there are a lot of like nobody really knows why the Pontus is happening. And a lot of people are like, it's kind of global warming. We don't care, right? So like this is like kind of setting the world, and I've got this campaign is going to be a little 6-week where there's going to be just like a lovely week in the country, where people are going to be there for midsummer's, a lovely week in the country, and nothing bad will happen whatsoever. It'll
I
be
I was gonna go, oh, A Midsummer's Night Dream, but then my brain was like, wait, what if that's kind of like the vibe of the thing I should.
but again, Midsummer Night Dreams was pretty peppy,
Yeah.
right? That was
Oh yeah,
was-
yeah, yeah.
sure. But yeah, so they've all been invited to a country estate. There's like a noble, um, the Viscount Bainbridge, who's in Surrey, and
I have a friend with the last name Bainbridge. Weirdly.
oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Is he a Viscount?
She is not.
Oh, well then. But like it's like this like, and he's like sort of an old sort of noble, and every year they have the big festival and party up there in his estate, and he just got married to a brand new woman who's a noble from Sweden who's no one has seen before or knows anything about, and she's just shown up in the last 6 months, and she'll be hosting this event this year, and she's changing everything, and I'm sure it's fine.
Freaking Swedish are basically elves anyway. Like,
Well, I mean, if there are any weird things going on,
yeah.
it's just different customs because she's Swedish, right? Like any kind of weird stuff, I'm sure it's just, because she's Swedish and nothing sinister.
Absolutely not.
No.
Since when would a GM have sinister things planned? That's
no. And the players are really fun. They've made some really cool characters. We've got an inventor, which I'm excited about. Yeah, we've got a really good stuff, and I'm really excited to see how they do, and how they tackle. Because here's the thing, backstory, which you'll find out probably in the intro,
Oh.
that things like there have been a lot of Pontus events happening in this area recently, which like a lot of them, and that's distressing. Like, why are there so many Pontus events happening? Certainly in the last couple of years, that Pontus events have happening, but ever since the new wife has shown up, there have been a lot of them, and that might be disconcerting. Nobody knows what's going on, but something creepy is happening. And Paladin Hulk wants to know who the cast is.
Yes.
We have Bonsai Baby, who's amazing, a great woodworker, crafter, really cool person. We have Murgles.
Oh, you got Murgles, dude. Lucky.
Yeah, I got Murgles. Yeah, pretty awesome. I'm very exciting. We have Draconique, who you probably have seen on a couple of different shows, and also I got Pumpkinberry. So
rude word.
It's gonna be real good. It's gonna be real good. We were supposed to do like a 2-hour session zero, but the session zero lasted an extra hour because they were just talking about backstory and how they connect. And I'm gonna tell you, got some great characters. I'm really excited to see what they're up to and what they're gonna do. And I'm excited for this because it's gonna be a little creepy. It's gonna be a little creepy.
I'm hoping to get because I've had Bentham in for a Bar Brawl to talk about like Roll for It stuff and just Bentham stuff. I'm hoping soonish. I've been chatting with him and like he's moving and stuff, but I'm hoping to get Brad in soon so we can talk about table story stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah.
So that should be fun. Just for the Bar Brawl stuff. But I have a question for you, Trooper, because I randomly think up things that like TTRPG related and stuff to talk about with people here. If and I'm gonna preface this because I know you'll take this seriously. Not saying that you could do it better, but just from a kind of like fascination and your own personal kind of enjoyment angle. If you could, if you had the chance to play someone else's character, like in a TTRPG,
Ooh.
so what I'm gonna say, in a game that you either GM'd or played in, but also as an additional question, just anyone in general, what would you go with? And I'm gonna give you a moment to think about it.
Well, first I have to get meta though.
Okay.
So I have to tell you about a weirdness about me.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I have this weird way of thinking about things, which is strange, strange,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes answering this question difficult. And I'm going to have to give you a couple of things as the background that leads to it, so you can understand it.
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, like, the entire podcast so far has been like we were talking about sports, dude, in a TTRPG podcast, and we are just
Yeah.
going on about football and soccer and
Wait.
boxing.
I'm going to interrupt myself for a moment. I actually think that the sports thing is actually really important.
Yes,
In
agreed.
the sense that many people think that the way to be successful, full circle, with your TTRPG stream is to think about it as a TV show,
Yeah.
right? Like it should be like a TV show, and maybe you should edit it, and maybe you should do this. And I was like, here's the thing: RPGs are not like TV shows.
Mm.
No matter what people say, they're not actually like TV shows.
They're
They
more
have,
like stand-up comedy.
I hope not. But they have a lot in common with sports, actually.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oftentimes they're similar lengths of time. There is an element of uncertainty that the audience is very excited about. Sometimes audiences are really into stats and paying attention. Like, so there's like, it's kind of like maybe a TV show and sports combined. And I think that when people forget the sport part, they are losing an element that a lot of audiences are really into. Anyway, but back to characters. So,
Characters, yes.
the TV show The Avengers from and not many games in the UK last 3 to 4 hours, says Damned Man. You're allowed 2 hours, yeah? In the UK, perhaps?
90 minutes for soccer, football.
Well, yeah, but cricket can go for 5 days.
Yeah, a week or 10 years for cricket.
Yeah, a week or 10 years, right?
Rugby is I think 80 minutes. I think it's both of them are like 2 halves.
Yeah.
Game of 2 halves. Yeah.
So the Avengers from the Mrs. Peel, Mr. Steed, 1966, 60 mid 60s, early 60s British TV show. One of the most influential things that ever happened to me in my entire life. I would not be the person I am today had I not watched that show when I was 11. Big deal. It's a big deal for me.
Okay.
And there's a thing about the show that impacted how I think about characters in interesting ways. And it's one of the reasons why I don't ship like other people ship.
Yeah.
Actually, a lot of people are like, oh,
go ahead. Can I also very quickly, at the risk of sending you off on a completely different tangent and we'll never answer this question, would you be okay with me describing you as dapper?
Sure. I mean, Mr. Steed's very important to me.
No, I was just, as you were talking about it and everything, I was like, you know what? Trooper's pretty dapper.
I have a bowler hat.
No, I appreciate like it came to my head and I was like, I appreciate that. I want to mention that if someone was to ask me to describe you in one word, I may go with dapper. So yeah, there you go.
Thank you. So
yeah, sorry, completely throwing you off there.
No, but this is important. So in the Avengers, right, Mr. Steed and Mrs. Peel, they were in series 4 and 5 of the show.
Yeah.
It was, people would say, is it there's that whole kind of will they, won't they thing that's very popular in shipping. Like, will they get together? Will they not get together? And I want these people to get together. And there's all this kind of stuff about that. But it was very clear to me that Mr. Steed and Mrs. Peel were totally having sex with each other.
Yeah.
Like, that was super obvious to me. It's just that they didn't let us know, but there were indications, right? That
Mm,
they had stuff going on. And so it wasn't, people said it wasn't will they, won't they, but are they or aren't they, right?
yeah.
Um, and I think that what's interesting to me is that when I was watching the show, I got a lot of indications that they had these personal lives that happened off screen
Mm,
as characters, right? So Mr. Steed and Mrs. Peel had these lives that we as viewers were not privy to, that we didn't see these moments. Like we knew that Mr. Steed went on vacation. We knew that Mrs. Peel was coming back from a party that we never got to see. And so I sort of developed this sort of idea that characters have personal lives outside of me as a viewer,
mm,
or even necessarily me as a player for talking RPGs.
yeah. Except for like Big Bang Theory, where they barely even have characters.
Yes, well, that is true. That is true. Um, and they had a bit of a privacy, right? They had a kind of a privacy to them. Like
Yeah.
they had lives that that they did not owe us. Which I understand that technically that's not true because they're fictional people. Like I
Yes.
get that, right? They're fictional people, but within the world, I had a very strong sense that they existed outside of me watching them, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to add in this other element. This is a very old school D&D style thing from back in the day. Um, in our old school D&D kind of harsh realm,
Yeah.
if your character died, they were dead, and you were not allowed to play them in other campaigns because they're dead,
Oh,
right? So,
okay.
like, if
Yeah.
you this is like a very old school thing, but if I got my first level character, I'm working through that thing, we get to level 6 or 7 and my character dies, um, now some GMs would actually just rip up your character sheet or allow you to rip up your character sheet, but
Mm,
even if the character sheet were not ripped up because you wanted to save it for posterity's sake, it was considered cheating to play that character in another campaign because the character died, right? Like the
yeah.
reality of that character is that they're dead. And so these two things together have sort of created and also playing characters in other campaigns. If they didn't die, moving them from one campaign to another was tricky.
Yeah.
Um, it was a little bit tricky. So and sometimes and James would often just say no. Um, and so this developed a kind of an idea wherein I think that my characters, especially also because the way I play characters, it seems to be very immersive,
Mm,
have a life that is not completely mine,
yeah.
right? So that they exist within their world, and there are things that I would consider disrespectful to do to my own characters, right?
Yes.
Like, and it's like a very, and I understand people are like, what are you talking about? But like, so for example, I
Um,
have a
like in a very like simplified and toned down way, uh having like someone else coming in and playing a character would feel like a little bit of a transgression on the character, not necessarily on yourself.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Okay.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Um, but also, for example, I had a VTM character who I loved, a daughter of cacophony,
Oof. I love the
um,
Daughters of Cacophony.
from before Revised,
Mm,
who was great, and we were set in San Francisco, I think. And I can never play that character again.
yeah.
Like I love that character, but I can never play that character again for a number of reasons. One, no other campaign. Uh, there might be theoretical ways in which it could happen, but it's very difficult because that character has other PCs that they know, that
Yeah.
they have spent years with, that are their friends. Also, things happen, some kind of big things happen, and if I took that character to another campaign, those things would not have happened, but those things did happen in my character's life, and so I'd have to basically it would be for
It'd
me,
be
it's
a
kind of doing a
different character almost.
it would be and it would be doing violence to that character, be kind of
Yeah.
disrespectful to that character to sort of move them over. There are ways in which it could work
Mm,
theoretically, but very often it wouldn't make sense to the character. It would seem disrespectful to me of that character to bring them over. Now, there are also that character doesn't make any sense once you hit revised,
yeah.
right? So like once revised happened, of the character no longer makes any sense because that character was not descended from Cain, because whether or not Cain was even real was not canon in second edition. It was
Mm,
question, like, is Cain real? We don't know. And like, like there were a lot of things in second edition that were not set in
yeah.
canon that were open questions. Like, is Cain real? Is Gehenna real? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And at that time, like a bunch of like the kindred from the east, daughters of cacophony, a bunch of vampires did not descend from Judeo-Christian um, religious texts. Like they
Yes.
had other roots, and so they just weren't. But once we hit revised, then all of a sudden Cain was real, Gehenna was real.
Mm,
All these things were real, which meant that a bunch of character concepts no longer worked. So my character cannot exist in a VTM world wherein they've advanced the meta plot and made certain things
yeah.
canon that were um, vague. So all of that said, I can think of very few examples where I would feel comfortable playing somebody else's character
Yes.
because it seems like a violation of the character itself. So I just don't think I could. The only way I could imagine it happening is if there's some kind of setup wherein a different character body swapped with that character, right? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
character has a soul and an essence, and I just don't think I just it would just feel like a violation of that character.
All
NPCs
right.
are different.
Yeah,
NPCs are
I
different,
was
but
about to
PCs I couldn't do.
say I was about to say if you could as a player play any like NPC
Mhm,
that
mhm.
either you've had in one of your things or that you've been a player and there's been a cool
Oh,
NPC.
oh,
Maybe
okay.
that'll help a little bit because
No, that one doesn't help either
oh
because, uh, because I very specifically never play NPCs as PCs,
yeah,
and I always make sure that I never think of or conceive of NPCs as PCs.
yeah.
No matter how often I play them, they for me are never PCs, and I keep that distinction very strong in my mind. Um,
I just to
yeah.
flavor the conversation with my own personals. I'd really like to play Grog from Critical Role because
Mhm, mhm.
I look at that dumb character and I marvel at how well and how non-meta
Mm,
Travis Willingham managed to play that character. I'd like to
mhm,
challenge myself to that type of character and see if I could
mhm.
do the same.
Mm, mhm, mhm,
To
mhm.
use because Critical Role's so so many
Yeah.
people know it. Uh, I think I could have a lot of fun with. Do you remember the dude who made the black powder in the first?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I think that NPC playing as a character could be really interesting to play as a PC and like just explore the insanity of that character.
Mhm, 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 mhm.
I 100% understand what you're saying in terms of like
It's just
you don't want
really
to you don't
it's
want to
very
step on people's
idiosyncratic.
yeah.
Like I know it's idiosyncratic, and I know it's weird
No,
because
no, no. It's fine because like it's even theoretically respect for like I like obviously I don't have as much have as much respect for people and their characters and stuff, but like yeah I'm not gonna be like yo even theoretically you can't come up with anything because it's your if it's something that you can't feel comfortable with, then it's not something that you should even have to consider doing because it's not something you'd want to do, you know?
what's interesting
Um,
to me is that it does come up like there are, conflicts that happen,
yeah,
right? And the conflicts are, for example, um and sometimes it's a conflict, sometimes it's just a difference. I, don't let people bring characters from other campaigns into my campaigns,
yeah.
unless the campaign concept allows for it.
Uh,
Like, and I know that that's an issue because I know a lot of people who play the same character over and over again. Like that's
yes,
really important to
yes.
them. They love their character. Like I've got my character Tristan, who's like a prince of the Fae, and from my changeling camp, like I had a character, a player who I was running a cyberpunk campaign, and they wanted to bring their changeling character Tristan into my campaign, and I said no.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time they got a no, because they always play Tristan no matter what the campaign was. They always put the same character, and I was like, you cannot play this character in this campaign. They did not appreciate that, but it's but like, and I
Yeah.
get that for the way that they play, they have 2 or 3 characters they play all the time,
Yeah.
and that's what is fun for them, but that does not work for me.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
uh, and it's just and so there was we had to have a whole conversation about that, and I was like, look, for this campaign, you need to make a character that is rooted in this campaign. You cannot port a character from some other campaign
Mm.
because of the way that I play, and GM. And we worked it out. It was fine. Um, they ended up making a person who was delusional, who thought they were the Prince of the Fae. It was a whole thing. Anyway, but
Oh God.
yeah, yeah,
The GM in me was just like, oh,
I
loopholes.
know,
No.
I know, and it sort of caused some problems,
But
which I
that,
thought it would, but it was
yeah,
fine.
but that's good at the same time, because like, as a GM, your instinct is to like set a rule and stick to rule, but you have to be able to compromise, because otherwise you'll end up with a combative show or campaign or whatever, where you're trying to like limit your players and your players are trying to beat you, and that can work in certain circumstances and stuff, but it can very often lead to, like you said, like awkward situations and etc.
Uh,
um
in the same in although to be fair, what would have been better would have been if that player had not been in the campaign,
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
I was trying to avoid certain things from happening, and all those things happened, which was the character, the player spending like 45 minutes talking about how awesome their character was in another campaign,
yeah,
and the rest of us were like, we would like to play and not hear about how great Tristan was in that last campaign, right? And I knew that was going to be a problem, and it was, and this like that. It's just that player was not suited to that campaign.
yeah.
And I think that one of the things that people need to learn, I think it's really important, is that not all campaigns are for everybody, and that's okay.
Well, and also like look at yourself as a player and either try to be flexible
Yeah,
or admit that you can't be flexible, and
yeah,
like don't put yourself,
yeah.
if you can't be flexible, don't put yourself into places where you need to be flexible,
Right,
essentially.
and that's not a bad thing on anyone.
No,
Do you know what I mean?
no, no,
Like
no, no.
like there were other campaigns that I could have come up with where this person's desire to play the same character over and over again would have been perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it would have been like, and but that was not this particular campaign.
As
And
as a GM, I like to challenge my cast, because I'm a show GM. I
mhm,
have done very few offline things. I find it strange, especially when I'm like, okay, so I've done a game where everyone was talking in third person,
mhm.
and I'm like, you walk into the room and there's a person there, and they're like, hello and welcome to the world of tomorrow, and they're like, I walk up and speak to the man and ask him about the things I need to
Mhm,
know, and I'm
mhm.
like, ooh, okay, yeah, okay. So basically, you talk to him and he tells you this and etc.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is really weird for me. I'm a show GM. You put on a show, but it's all about how people play, and in that instance, I'm like, I shouldn't. I probably for the most part shouldn't do offline games, because I'm used to running a show and like it's entertainment, and it's very different from an offline like private game with friends. Um,
On your players,
yeah,
right?
it
Like
depends on your players. Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
depends on your players.
So
Uh,
if everyone wants the kind of more crunchy third person talking and not much role play and stuff, I'll be like, I'm not the GM for you. It's
right.
I
And those games are in the top 10 most watched games on
yeah,
Twitch, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there are a lot of super crunchy third person games that are like in the top 10. So like just because your stream doesn't mean you won't get that style.
Oh
And
yeah,
also
absolutely, yeah.
my offline games tend to have a lot of theater kids, and so they tended to have a more theatrical style, even if we
Mm,
were offline.
mm.
So it really, and also, of course, you can do third person in a way that's very theatrical and showy.
Oh
You can do
yeah,
first
yeah.
person in a way that's not. Uh, there was a video, like the very first video essay I'm going to do on YouTube, which I'm going to do. I just haven't done it yet because of time.
Oh,
Was
time. Damn.
yeah, I know. Was a reaction to a video that I thought was mostly very good, but there were a couple holes in it, and clearly this was coming from a space of reaction to shaming, right? It's like the whole
Yeah,
point of the whole, and I think it went too far, right? So the whole point of the video was that
it usually does.
yeah, was that GMing in third person doesn't mean you're not a good RPer,
Yes.
right? So the whole thing was basically defending third person play as RP, which is fine, right?
Was
But then they
was
went,
was this a critical reaction? Like a
well, I would
reaction to Critical Role?
no, I think it's a reaction to the ways in which people tend to say that if you don't speak in first person, you're not really RPing, and they've got
Oh,
that too much,
okay,
and
yeah,
so
yeah,
they were
fair enough.
right, right, and so that they were being shamed for RPing in third person, and they did a whole thing about how third person can also be RP, and which is cool, but then they went too far, right? And they were like, in my experience, people only do first person when they basically don't really want to RP, when they just want to be themselves. So
Yeah.
there's no real RPing in first person. I was like, oh, and you went too far. Like,
Mm,
just because people shamed you doesn't mean you want to turn it around and do the same thing. And I wanted to like talk about, like, as a player and as a GM, I sometimes do third person and sometimes do first person. And it's not about if I want to be, if I'm playing myself or not. It's about pacing, right? So like they're different. Like, so it was like basically because people had shamed this person
yeah.
in their third person preference, he turned around and shamed people who did a first person preference and said, okay, well, I'm actually
Mm,
the real RPer and you're really not. And I was like, let's not do any of that. Like there are different reasons why people do different things
yeah.
in different moments that can have different effects. I totally get what this person was saying about how you can do third person in a really dramatic and showy and exciting way. Totally, I get that, and I'm with you, and I defend that person. And anybody who wants to shame them, I want to say, hey, don't shame them. But like, you don't need to go and turn around and be like, and now I'm going to punch you in the face. Like, let's all relax, right? And so I just kind of
Yeah.
want to get uh, that part in, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and so like I just think about the ways in which, uh, yeah. But the thing is that there's a lot of ideas. Like a lot of people will say things like, they're like there are people who say, well, real gaming is what you do when you're offline, because offline, it's really this and that. And I was like, hold on, I play offline and I don't do that. Like, let's not make blatant statements. Like, there's a
Yeah.
wide variety of what offline games look like and a wide variety of what online games look like. And sort of trying to create a binary, which uh, there was a big Twitter thread. There was this big binary set up, and uh, that sort of basically implied that the theatrical kind of style is not real RPing. It's not
Mm,
real role playing games.
yeah.
It's not real. It's fake
It's
and it's phony.
it's all just perspective. It's what you grew up with.
Yeah.
It's what
Yeah.
works for you and what
Yeah.
you are used to. And
Yeah.
so
And I was
yeah,
like, oh,
I get it.
I was like,
Um,
hold on. Basically implying that people who do a kind of the showy style um, are not. That's not what it's really like. That's not what people really do. And I
mm,
was like, hold on. I've been doing that for decades. Like people really do this as well. It depends on like what system are you playing.
yeah.
Like people, what game are you playing? What system are you playing? What kind of games you are? And just I just kind of want uh, like I just get so tired of that. Like, well, my thing is the real RPG, and your thing is
Yeah.
not the real RPG. It's like we're all real RPGs. Let's relax.
Let's
And there's
all just chill and
yeah, let's
enjoy
all
what
just chill.
we're doing instead of looking at other people and going, "You're
Yeah,
doing that wrong."
because you're not. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, the only time you're doing that wrong really comes into play is like, for example, if someone is trying to tightrope walk with ice skates, and then
yes,
you might be able to be like, hey, you're probably doing that wrong. You may not want to do that.
yeah, and it's like, and I think about this with like the really crunchy um gamist old school D&D style where the GM is out to you know uh challenge the players,
Yeah.
and the players are super meta all the time. And I know people are like, "Oh my god, that's so hostile. That's so terrible." It's like, actually, it's not.
No,
Uh,
as long
you
as everyone
want
enjoys it and is having
as
fun.
long as everyone enjoys it and is having fun. And
Yeah.
oftentimes, I find that the critiques of that style, which by the way is not my favorite style, don't
Ditto.
understand the style.
Yeah.
Right? They think that the GM is trying to kill the players when what the GM is kill the PCs. When having played that style back in the day and not particularly enjoyed it, but I played it. Um, the whole rocks fall, everybody dies would be considered cheating and
Yes.
bad form.
Yeah.
The GM is supposed to be fair. The GM is supposed to challenge you, and the The thrill is that you as a player were able to figure out that trap and we're able
Yeah.
to get around the thing. It's the same kind of thrill that readers of Agatha Christie get when they're able to figure out who the murderer is before it's revealed, right? Like there's a
Yeah.
particular kind of charge that people want a really hard challenge,
Yeah.
and then they want to beat the challenge, and that's a different
Well,
style. But it's
and
not like it's a totally valid style. It's just
mm,
a different style. That's all.
it's also like you used an example of like murder mystery,
Hmm.
and I'm like, that's a really good point because there are people who want to immediately figure it out, and they're like
Hmm.
analyzing the
Hmm.
story and the
Hmm.
characters, and
Hmm.
they get a lot of satisfaction from figuring
Yep.
out the 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 answer before the answer
Yep.
is given. But there's a lot of
Yep.
people who also don't want to know. They don't. They
That's
just
right.
they just want to enjoy the like.
Hmm.
They want to enjoy the story and enjoy
That's
the
right.
ride. So they sit
Yep.
back and they wait for the
Hmm.
reveal,
Right.
and that's like exactly the same. Where it's like, yeah,
Yep.
people enjoy things in different ways. Now,
That's right.
for myself personally, and I'm sure Trooper, I get the feeling you'll probably agree with me on this. I've seen the downsides to the kind of combative tabletop experience where it's like it's very easy to get into the mindset of like GM gives me challenge, how do I beat
Hmm.
challenge, when you then
Hmm.
go and you cast or you player under a GM like me or possibly Trooper where we're not like a lot of the
Yep.
time I don't have any big hammers over the players'
Yep.
heads
Yep.
that's going to like challenge or kill them
Yep.
because I want them to instigate their own things and to get into their own trouble and you know I'm just basically like acting out things that they instigate.
Yeah.
Um when I have a like semi good example like me and my player at the time talked about it. It's essentially he got to a position whereby there was a building that he was trying to get in, but it was like 3 in the morning. There aren't very many ways to get into like an apartment complex if you don't have a key or whatever. And he tried like ringing the doorbell and pretending he was a pizza man. The person he rang was on the bottom floor and could just look out their window and see that he didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a pizza. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he was trying to like wait there and wait for someone to walk in, but it was like 3 a.m. You know, no
Yeah.
one's
Yeah.
walking into the building at 3 a.m. Um, it's you know, like me and Hydra talked about it afterwards. And you know, was a bit more I was a bit more correct about what the game was
Mm-hmm.
because essentially he was in the mentality of this is a challenge for me to overcome that the GM has put here for the story. So he wanted like in the way of a cast member, in the way of a player, he wanted to enact that challenge and to, you know, get the entertainment for the viewers and for himself
Mm-hmm.
in overcoming a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
From my point of view, it's a sandbox and sometimes the thing you want to do can be achieved but not through like crafty or like it's like you can pick the lock but people may notice you. You can smash a
Right.
window and get in. There's always ways to do things, but it's about what you're willing to do and the consequences of such. So
Right.
essentially, he could maybe have tricked his way in or figured out a way in, but it wouldn't have been with the outcome he wanted to achieve.
Right.
So it was a little bit of a roadblock for a moment, whereby like he couldn't figure out a way to do the thing he felt he had to do,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't as a GM, I wasn't giving him like you know a convenient backdoor to get past the roadblock. Um, but you know, after we talked and we kind of went over it and that, he was like, "Oh, okay, I understand a little bit more what you mean," and yeah, and we figured it out, and then from then on, there wasn't the instances of you know where's the challenge that the GM is presenting
Yeah.
for me.
And it's tricky, right? Because I've also seen other styles done very badly. People talk a lot about like that old school D&D style, how it can go badly, but I have seen other styles go badly as well. People don't talk about that as much, but I have.
Oh yeah, I mean, people who love role playing and are super into the role play
Hmm.
aspect will
Hmm.
role play themselves into corners,
Right? Or
whereby they like their character can't do anything or interact
Mhm.
because of the way they like super. I've played, I've GM'd, I've been in games with players who are amazing role players, like super veteran role players who really get into character, but they've got bored with the standard like tropes.
Mm.
So they're like they go into a D&D game and they're like, can I be an alien
Yeah, 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 yeah.
from another dimension who's actually a super spy who can like jump mines? And it's like, that sounds really cool. That's gonna fuck up the entire game.
The answer is no, you cannot.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
that's when I say no.
yeah.
Um, but also like it's also just about it's about the player of the GM, right? Like if everybody's cool with that old school D&D style, then it's super fun. Just like,
Yes.
if somebody like, and also as an RPer, I always say like, well, um my character, if you insulted my character, they would get really mad and stab you in the face. And I was like,
Mm,
well, I assume that your character has lived 30 years so far because your character's 30, and they have not stabbed everyone in the face. So clearly your character has made other choices at times. Maybe you could make that other choice right now. Like most people in the world make different choices different
yeah,
times and think
yeah.
about what would be an interesting choice. And now of course also sometimes, I have a character that was like I have a character I'm thinking about right now that was like, well, because of various things, I think I need to retire this character. Like
Mm,
no hard feelings, but I think I need to retire the character because I don't think the character works, and that's fine too. Do you know what I mean? Like, as long as everybody's cool with like sometimes you recognize that this character needs to retire, and that's all right. Um, to make that work.
oh,
But I also was thinking about I was in a my very first really narrativist game was like I don't know, late 90s. And it was like
mm,
really like big really story, like not the old D&D style relit story heavy. It was a D&D game. Maybe it wasn't a D&D game. It might have been something else. Anyway, but the point is the GM really wanted that really narrativist style. And
it's an adjustment,
the-
I would imagine.
they decided my character died at the climax of the campaign. Uh,
Oh,
right, because
that's yeah.
that was what was best for the story, right? What's best for the story is for my character to die heroically in a sacrifice by like jumping into like a portal or whatever. And so just decided my character died because that made the best story. And I suppose it did, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I was like,
Well,
well,
yeah, you can't, you as a GM in general, your enjoyment and things are important, the same as the players, but
mhm.
eventually you have to bring yourself around to the fact that what you want to happen is not important. Like you
Depends on the
can,
style of game though,
like,
right?
yeah, yeah, like if you talk to your players and you're like, this is what I want to happen and stuff, like, sure, that it's a slightly blanket statement.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah.
say in general, um if you want a certain story beat or narrative beat to happen, um you will have to be expect your players to be upset because you're basically going to strong arm something into happening regardless of player choice or autonomy.
Right, yeah, and of course, it also depends on the players. Like, there are players who actually do want that, um, right? Like, there are players for whom that is actually what they want.
Yes,
That
yes.
was not what I wanted, and and it's like, and of course,
Communication is
the
key so far.
communication is key, but also recognition, like sort of recognize. It's hard to communicate if you don't recognize there are different styles in the first place. Like if you have not thought about style at all and you think we all RP the same, then you don't recognize that these might be things. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think this
Yeah.
is for me one of the things I think is most valuable about some RPG theory is that it gave people the prompt to think about different styles, right? So it's not that the old school D&D style is bad, it's just a different style. It's not like playing uh for the queen is not an RP. It's totally an RP. It's just a different style.
Yeah.
And to be able to understand that, oh, uh, what vampire is doing is just different than what uh, some other game might be doing, and then to understand that, and like for me, what has been really useful is to think, how do I come into this game? How do
Mm,
I change what I'm doing to match this game,
mm,
right? And I think and to sort of recognize that, like, I have seen, like, people, for example, people say there are peers versus min-max murder hobos. But if the game is a murder hobo game, then the RPer would be RPing a murder hobo, right? Like
Yeah.
that could be your concept. And I've seen people min-max in super narrative games with no combat in ways I was like, wow, this is what a power gamer looks like in a game with no combat. I see how it is. You're like, so
Yeah.
like just
Yeah.
just recognize that you can do these different impulses in all different sorts of ways. And
Um,
just try to make sure that you're doing it, that everybody's on board.
so I want to get us back on track of what you're doing in a second.
Mm,
Because this is how we talk. Like me and Trooper haven't interacted that much. In the ability to like talk back and forth to each other.
mm.
Usually we'd be like, hey, in chat and etc.
Yeah.
But we've hung out a couple of times now, and this is what it devolves into: is like we go off on a massive tangent for a long time, and it's super interesting, and then I forget what the hell we were talking about. Because this whole conversation started with, if you could play someone else's character,
Yes. Yes.
I was expecting at some point for you to just take a comedy pause, like a comedy beat, and then go, sorry, what was the question? um,
Um,
but yeah, just to as a GM, like predominantly GM, I find myself when I make a character, because I play so many NPCs who are
mhm,
not like they can be close to my heart, but they aren't
mhm.
personal
Right.
because
That's
they're
right.
NPCs.
Right.
I find myself when I make a character as a player, very often I'm like, what does the party need? What can I do?
Yes.
What can I
Yeah.
do for the GM to make it
Yeah.
work better? And I
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
like that can be really helpful, but it can also be kind of a problem because you as a GM, you want your players to play something they want to play. And as helpful as it can be to have a player who's like very flexible and very willing to adjust to what's
Mhm.
needed or to what might be wanted, it's not, it's the same way as if you come in and you're too definite. You're like, I want to play a werewolf in a vampire game.
Mhm. Mhm.
In the same way, it's like if you're too flexible and you don't have your own opinions, you can often end up making a character that, while like useful for everyone else, you find yourself like with very little connection to. I find that can happen to me as a player. Um, just as like an additional kind of like thought in there in the whole quagmire of our sidebars. Um,
Yeah. I see what you're saying, and what I will say to that is because, um, I have a lot of things to say about that, or maybe a couple of things. One is,
we'll
uh,
see. Come back
yeah.
in 3 hours and see if we're still
Let's see.
talking.
Um, so I am like you in that I am very much a fill player. Like if I
Yeah.
come into a thing, okay, what do people need, and I will do that thing. Um,
I mean, you,
and
you weren't for the last ditch. You very much jumped in and you're like, yes, ideas, which was
um,
really
but
great and
then
a lot
what
of fun.
character I play within that context is like, okay, what do we need, right?
Mm, mm,
Um, and I very much do that. But I think, like, when people say, "But I want you to play what you want to play," I was like,
yeah.
"Yeah, I don't think what I want is to play a character that fits
Oh,
within the context.
yeah.
That's what I want."
It's
Right? So,
not
like,
a criticism or like a
no, 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 no.
it's
But
yeah
but
it's
I've had this with D&D all the time.
mm,
This has been a frustration where I will say, people are like, "Let's play D&D." I'm like, "Okay, so what is everybody playing? What's going on? Let's coordinate." And be like, "No, no, nobody needs to talk to anybody. Just play what you want to play." And I was like, "Yeah, what I want to play is a character that is connected to other characters, and so I kind of need to know
yeah.
what everybody's doing, and I want to play a character that is useful to the group." Um, and when people take that possibility away from me, it's very frustrating because what I want is actually to make sure that my character fits well. And if the GM, which has really only happened in D&D, does not want those conversations to happen, and it's usually the GM will say, "Oh no, it doesn't matter what you play, I'll make it work. So you can play anything you want." And I was like,
Mm,
"Right, right, but I actually do want to know what everybody else is playing
yeah. Yeah.
so that I can make a character that complements."
For my own personal preference, like what we and Bentham's a goddamn genius. What we do for the guest casts for the Last Ditch is beautiful. Where like Bentham basically said to me, Shibi, we like technically speaking, you've done all the character creation for them, right? You know, like the sheets and stuff. Those are kind of word of the day. Those are kind of superfluous to the show almost. What we need to do is get all the cast in and just let them interact and brainstorm and vamp for like a few hours.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
both times we've done it, it's been beautiful, whereby you guys are all playing off each other and coming up with really cool ideas. And all it needs from me and Bentham is like, oh, like that's a really good idea. What if also this? And you know, just kind of like throw in a few suggestions now and then. And yeah, like for the last one for your cast, we ended up with some really great and interesting ideas and characters and stuff, you know. So that's the type of thing I really enjoy personally.
But also, and here's the other thing about playing the character I want to play and getting a character I can have depth with. Um, I have developed some skills that are skills that I've developed because I played for a very long time in games that I did not enjoy.
Yeah,
Um, right, so I was playing a lot of old school D&D in a way that I did not enjoy at all because
yeah.
that was the only options for me. Where people thought talking was a waste of time, right? Like it was very old
Mm,
school where we go
mm.
in, we kill the dungeon. Any kind of like RP was considered wasting time from uh,
The
killing the
fun.
things and get from the fun,
Yeah.
right? And so I spent a couple years in games like this. And so I developed tools wherein I could end up making a character that would be fun for me that would not detract from what everybody else was there for, which was to kill the things. So, in many ways, it really doesn't matter. Like, if you say to me, what we need is a cleric, I will make that character interesting for myself.
Yes.
I can take any character and make it interesting for myself, even if you never know about it,
Yeah.
because that's what I had to do for years. So like the Phil character, I can make any Phil character interesting for me,
Oh
and I can
yeah,
have
yeah.
a relationship to that character that is deep, and it may be only in my mind, right? It because like like and it like and
Oh
like seriously because like when I was playing in games where they did not think that talking was interesting at all, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to create an inner life for my character, and so this has very much impacted the way I make characters now. I tend to sort of come at characters um, with the idea of what makes a character interesting for me. And it's actually fascinating because I was noticing a difference between myself and other people on Twitter recently based on how they make their characters, and it's very, very different. Um, uh, so I've seen people say recently, "Oh, I want to make a character where they've got this slow burn with another PC for the entire campaign. At the end of the campaign, they ask them to marry them. I want to play that character. Who wants to do that?" And that is completely alien to the way that I make characters because
mm,
I'm not a narrativist at my heart. I do not have a beginning, middle, and end that I want for my character. I do not have
yeah.
goals for my characters that I want to have. And many people do. And if I'm a GM and I'm GMing those people, I will work real hard to give them those things. But as a player, that is not what I want. What I want is to not know what's going to happen to my character. So what I do when I create a character is that I come up with a conflict.
Yes.
And if I'm in a campaign with players that do not like to RP, that conflict is an internal conflict that I can just work through myself that nobody needs to know about.
Mm.
If I'm in a campaign with players who do like to RP, that conflict may be internal or it may be external. Either way is fine. Um, but like for me, that what's interesting about my character is this character here um, wants something or has an insecurity or has some kind of a thing. And then
Or a
what I want
secret
to
game that no one knows about,
yeah, some kind
aside
of
from the players.
yeah, some kind of a thing, right? Some kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And what the game for me then is how will this conflict play out? How will it resolve? And I don't
Mm.
know. And I'm often not invested in the out like I don't have an outcome that I will make happen. I want to find out what will happen. I think a really good example of this is, which makes me very different from really narrativist players, is that I made a character who was a bigot in a transhuman space game,
Okay.
very, very conservative, uh, conservative Catholic, which meant something very specific
Mm.
in the setting.
Yeah.
Uh, in that conservative Catholics, which were basically limited to the United States or North America, did not believe that AI had souls, nor did they believe that androids had souls.
Oh, okay.
Um, so they did not believe that they had souls, and they also felt like treating them like they had souls is idolatry and kind of against God. So
Mm, okay,
my
yeah,
character was not down for AI rights, is what I'm gonna just to put it sort of in
yeah,
a short way of doing
yeah,
it.
yeah,
And there are a lot of reasons why this happened. There were a lot of things going on there, but my character had this kind of bigotry against bioroids, and I thought I'm really and also like was very conservative in ways that had to do with trauma and all sorts of stuff, right?
yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna pick this character. And one of the other conflicts was that this character was very not particularly technological in a
Mm,
technological world, right?
mm.
They were like a kinesthetic learner, very physical,
A
and they were
Luddite, is that the word?
yeah, basically a Luddite.
Yeah,
And but they now live in a world where the skills that they have are no longer really relevant,
yeah.
right? And can they adapt with the new times? Can they and so like I was like, I'm really excited to see how this character will develop when
And
they're
that's a lot of potential character progression and
oh
learning,
yeah.
and that's really
Oh,
interesting.
well, I was like super excited to find out what happened. And we also had a character in another PC in the party who was a bioroid, except that none of us knew it. Right. And I was like,
Mm,
and was like a former Jesuit priest. There's all this stuff. I was like, oh, there's so many great possibilities. And as a player, I thought, oh, I really hope my character, who I liked, I hope my character grows and becomes more open
yeah,
and realizes that like comes to terms with their bigotry and where it's stemming from and like becomes a more open person by the end of this campaign. That was my hope for the character,
yeah.
but I didn't know what would happen,
Mm.
right? Like I didn't know.
You're not gonna force it because that's what you
No,
want. You're gonna
no.
follow the narrative and the story and
Yes.
and
Yes.
the outside influences that happen to
Yes.
your character. Yeah,
And knowing the character, I knew it was possible. I knew it was
yeah.
possible that they could grow and become more open. I knew it was possible.
Well,
But I had to
because
find out what would happen,
like
right?
like regardless of how close-minded a person or like even ignorant a person can be,
Mhm.
there's very few people in this world that would classify themselves as like evil or
Right,
bad.
yeah.
So
And the
like
thing is,
the
he wasn't
possibility for growth is
evil.
always there.
You know what I mean? Like, and he
Yeah,
was, and he had, and one of the reasons why he was so anti-bioroid is because in this universe, bioroids are often used um, as sex slaves,
yeah.
right? People will just create bioroids for sex trafficking, and he had been a vice police officer, and like he just saw a lot of really awful things. He's like, this should not be happening, right? So anyway, he
See,
was
this is
okay.
really interesting. I want to GM this, dude.
Like, but what ended up happening is I was really hoping for this character, and I saw like, oh, here are these spaces where it could happen, and at every turn, the moments where I thought my character could move forward and become more open were thwarted. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, dang it. Like the character who was the bioroid, um, we ended up trusting that PC.
And then
We trusted them,
yeah.
and they betrayed the party in an epic way that was real bad. And I was like, well, that sucks because my character is going to be now more distrustful of
Yeah.
bioroids because the player and that player retired that PC and brought in a new PC. And like every time there was a moment where my character could progress and become more open, things happened outside of my control as a player that just reinforced their prejudices
Is
and made them more conservative. And we ended that campaign after
mm,
3 years. And the character who I had hoped for them that they would become more open. And in the end, they didn't. And I
yeah.
was disappointed in them, but that was true. Like that
Yeah.
was the truth of that character.
Yeah.
And they ended up being a little bit more broken, a little bit more fearful
Prejudiced?
of the world, than they had been when they started.
Yeah.
They did allow they did recognize it, and they allowed their daughter to be in a more open space in the end
Okay.
than they were. So, like, their daughter's gonna have a better life than they did,
Yeah.
but I was very disappointed in my character, but it was true,
Yeah.
and it was a great campaign, and I would never have forced that character to progress in the way that I wanted because I thought it would make a better story.
Yeah.
Like, it's a better story if the character starts off bigoted and they have the buddy cop thing, and in the end, they grow because that's just not what happened. And I would
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
force it, even though it
It's
was
how
maybe yeah,
like for your own kind of outlook and preference and things, it's
yeah,
how you would prefer things to go. It doesn't mean it's how
yeah,
it makes sense in the moment. It doesn't mean it's how it makes sense like narratively and everything,
yeah,
because it's
yeah.
just because it's your preference doesn't mean it's the truth. And like
Yes,
these
but
things can happen where people
yeah,
even try to grow and
Yeah,
fail, you know,
and
like
they
even if they
fail.
want to, they still
Yeah,
find themselves falling back on thought patterns
yeah.
and behaviors.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
It's a less classic story though, right? Like
yeah.
if we're gonna go narrativist style, that character would have had that growth because that's the arc, right? The arc is the character
Well,
goes through their trouble and they grow, and then like in the end,
to
it's better.
to wrap things up very nicely narratively, that's why RP and roleplay shows and stories, etc., aren't films or TV. It's why they're
Yeah,
sports.
yeah,
It's why they're
yeah,
like sports because the underdog doesn't always win. Very often, Man
yeah,
United will score
yeah,
200 goals against freaking,
yeah,
you know, Scunthorpe
yeah,
McCrappy Pants.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, very, very quickly, I have a question for you, which is,
Yes.
I was very impressed with your British accent.
Oh, mhm.
Your both, all of your British accents actually were very, very nice.
I've
Um,
been developing my northern. My northern's getting better. I'm working on it. I
oh,
still can't do
okay.
Liverpool though. Uh,
So,
'Cause Liverpool's hard, but go on.
Liverpool is hard. My question for you is just in general, are there any and you kind of semi answered this actually, thanks. Are there any accents that you'd like to do but you haven't been able to, or because like I'm very much someone who will just jump into accents without being good at them. Um, you know,
Depends on the campaign. Depends on the
yeah,
campaign.
it's like I've always been terrible at Irish accents, but
Mm.
as time went on, I kept doing it, and I feel like I got a little bit better at the Irish, and I know that I know that I have like some viewers who are from Ireland, and they hate my Irish accents, but I'm okay with that. So
The
yeah,
one that I do not have yet that I want
yeah,
real bad, I really want my Australian to be good, but Australian is hard because
it
their
is.
vowels are so complicated. And
I always find myself going because I watch quite a few New Zealand shows.
mhm,
I always find myself going New Zealand
mhm, mhm.
because the word do you use like words and phrases to get into the accent?
Usually sometimes I'll use words and phrases,
I should get
yes, and I often there are people who are touch tones for me sometimes,
yeah.
where I really try to um, if I need to, I have to like get back in. I have to think about that one person, like like that person's accent. How did they speak?
So
Um,
in a lot of the New Zealand shows that I watch, there's one word that they use for having sex, which is
mhm,
root, and
mhm,
I find that word very often is good at getting me into like the New Zealand accent. And
mhm.
it comes and goes, but and I'm not good at New Zealand accent at all. But if I like root, you have that like root, and then I'm like, yeah, okay, so I can kind of talk root. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm,
It helps me
mhm.
talk with a, but Australian is I don't know, probably like put another shrimp on the barbie. I'm bad at Australian, and one of my mods who's in the thing right now is Australian. And Doc, don't judge me.
I have not debuted my Australian accent because it's not there. Like I
See,
just need
I don't
more
mind about
time.
that. I'll just like I can do a Southern Belle really badly, but
See,
I
for
always
me, it's about
rely on the kindness of strangers.
ranges. For me, it's about like whether or not we're going comedy or not. If
Yeah,
we're going comedy, then I can do a lot of things, but Australia's just not there yet because
yeah.
I just don't have the vowels. It's like I listen, and it's like the word no. Like I listen to like it's just not
No.
there. Yeah, it's like this is what I'm saying. It's like they're like four vowels in the way they say the word no. Like they're like 18 vowels. I'm like, I don't know how you got four syllables out of the
Um.
word no, but
So
it's brilliant, and I don't have it yet.
it's NOUGH. No. Wait, did I lose Trooper? You there?
No,
Oh,
I'm contemplating it. I'm, like, conceptualizing it in my mind
yeah.
at the moment. Like, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. But that's
Scottish
one
is
that I
another
want.
one I find difficult.
Oh, I don't have Scottish either yet. That one's not there yet for me. Yeah, I'm working on it.
It's the only thing I can really do in Aussie is just no.
Yeah, because the no's hard,
Yeah.
right? Because there's it's, Aussie and the thing is Aussie and of course, like, Is it a
Aus-
posh Aussie? Is it like
yeah,
a
Australian,
outback Aussie?
Australian, New Zealand, and South African.
Oh yeah,
Or
yeah.
they all kind of bleed into each other. So I can't really do South African either, but it's still better than my better than my Australian, because now I'm in my Australian, so
Mhm.
I've done that
Your O is
accidentally
so
and
good. Your O is so good. I need the Australian O. I don't have it, but I need it. I can't do
it's
Australian until I get the O.
yeah,
That's
it's
it.
just O. It's slight razor pitch and no,
But see, it's not just O because there's like three vowels.
yeah,
There's like an O,
yeah,
a U, and there's like another thing that hits at the very end. Like there's
good. It's kind of a
like a
no.
there's like a little aftertaste. Do you know what I mean? Like in that vowel
It's
that
almost Arnold Schwarzenegger. With I can do Arnold Schwarzenegger if you like. Come on, you have to go. You have to get to the chopper. What are you waiting for?
it's not a tumor.
It's not a tumor. It's not a tumor.
So yeah, and
Uh,
I think about it. Like I tried it. Like and I just I went and there's like a, a new app that I downloaded on my phone, and
if you like, I can try and do Morgan Freeman. I'm not
mm,
amazing at it, but I feel like I have a little bit of it down.
it's called. Where did I put it? It's called the Accent Kit. They need to be
Mm,
better, but the Accent Kit's really good because you can sort of pick an accent, like part of the world, right? And then they've got usually they have a couple different people, different ages. Like so, I'm looking at Cornwall, right? So they've got a Cornwall uh, dude, a Cornwall gal. I've got this Spain because I was doing an accent that was a a bit uh, what's the word uh, Game of Thrones, Dornish. So it's like
oh,
listen
right,
to
right.
Spain, and like it's nice because I was like okay, and I was doing for the regiment I was doing a character that I was thinking was being a bit sort of south southeast England rural, and I was like okay good. There's like okay I can get that one. So like just trying to get some good
Whoa.
models so you can
Oh,
hear
what are you looking for?
the
The
rhythm of it,
the
the
sort
rhythm
of
of it.
the sort of farmer
Yeah, that's right.
like yeah, well, it's something where you just have to kind of like mumble a lot and
But you get the R's though. The R's come in there.
oh yeah, it's it's funny because I actually came about the kind of English farmer accent
Mhm.
because I was torturing Bentham on one of our games, and all of the NPCs he had this accent, and they were like he was a very smart kind of guy,
Mhm.
and they were really dumb and like okay, so basically they were chaos 40k chaos worshippers, and they're trying to
Mhm.
convert these farmers into worshipping chaos. And Bentham was like being really intelligent and being like, oh,
Mhm.
but if you like throw off the shackles of your masters, you can be free. And they're like, but who will pay me for my work? And he's like, no, you pay each other. And he's like, I don't want to pay people for my work. And all this terrible thing. And then Peachy's character, who was a massive idiot, his character actually ended up role playing himself to zero intelligence and dying.
Oh,
Yeah, it was brilliant. Like Peachy's character just stepped up onto the podium and went, "All right, who wants to join Chaos?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, we will." And he's like, "Okay, good." And then that was it. They joined. They converted and joined Chaos. And Bentham's character was like, "God, I hate farmers." And then they all became his followers. Like all his followers were the farmers. And so yeah, I just wanted to do an accent and started doing it for no reason. And then yeah, that's why I can do the farmer kind of accent. So that's a lot of my accent work and stuff is just me being like I want a specific type of character,
mhm, mhm.
and I don't care if people are offended by my terrible accents or hate them or whatever. I'll just do them and I'll get better slowly as I go. One of my favorites is Foreign Man. Um, from a British perspective, which is basically, hey, how's it going? What do you want today? You know, it fucks my voice a little bit. Sorry. So I was like, hey, how's it going? You come in? Yeah, you want this thing here? Yeah, you can have it. Yeah, there is no country that person is from.
Right, yeah.
It is literally just, I sound foreign and I'm trying to sell you some shit.
Can I say, so many Americans do very bad British accents. That's all very true.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah.
I really love it when you see a British person trying to do American accent badly. I love that. It's
I'm
awesome.
walking here.
It's like it's usually in I find that Irish people do American accents. Irish actors do American accents pretty well.
Yeah.
The Australians do it pretty well. But when somebody from the UK does it poorly, what I notice is that they hit the R's too hard. They'll hit their R's too hard, and I was like, nope, too much.
hey there, program. What are you doing?
There. And I was like, oh, that's
I'm
fun.
from America.
Yeah.
I would really like some fries and burgers.
And I was like, oh, too much R, but that's fun.
Is that entertaining for you?
It really is, though. It really is, because it lets you know what people are hearing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I find that fascinating. Like, I love to hear what people are hearing when they hear us. There's
it's like how for the longest time the only British accent anyone knew in America was the posh British one.
That's right.
all of the American shows that had British people in them, they all spoke the Queen's English, when actually most of them talk like fucking, about like, consonants and shit. What the fuck are those?
Yeah. Oh, so I remember. Okay, so there's a thing that I'm a little bit obsessed with. And it's about the fantasies that countries have of other countries and the use of them, right? Very specifically, the relationship between the UK and the US.
Very, very quickly, because I feel like I know the answer, but before we get into this, we do still have to do the tier list.
Yes,
and we've been going for quite a while. I don't want to keep you forever. So, I'm happy to start doing tier list when you want. It'll probably take a little bit of time, so we've already been going for probably the longest of any of these Bar Brawls. I don't know what your schedule's like, and when you need to call things and head off. So,
I've got things to do. I'll do them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, you say this, but we've been going for almost 3 hours. And I've barely asked you anything because we keep tangenting, and I'm like, at some point I will interject and say, hey, so what are you up to, and what are your plans and stuff, and then I'm like, I want to do this, but I also want to listen on what Trooper's saying, because this shit is interesting. So
I feel like I've answered that question. I feel like I'm way less exciting.
No, because like you have things you're gonna do. Like, I want to ask you, like, are you just going to be running like the one RP show on your channel? Are you planning to expand into more slots and more shows? Like, what are you going to do there? Like GMing. Obviously, you're going to come on to my show and GM, on my channel and GM at some point, because I'm going to make you.
You can't see me wiggle my eyebrows. I'm wiggling my eyebrows right now. So what I would say is, so this is interesting. I have a full-time job.
Yes.
I am lucky that at this moment I'm on a research leave, so I can control my own schedule. And that's also going to happen in the fall. But at the moment, I've been a little bit ridiculous because it has been the pandemic.
Yes.
I've been doing like sometimes 9 streams a week, and I cannot do that once I go back to full-time teaching.
Yeah, that's fair.
I just can't. So I have to be really careful about what I'm doing. And at the moment, for my channel, like, I want to try to keep those 3 streams. And what I end up doing is, like, in the break between seasons of Kolos, I'll do something else. And I have to ask the cast if they want a season 4. I always ask if they want to renew. That's important. And I would like to, because I really actually would, ideally I would write up Kolos when I have time after I finish the academic work as a book and actually sort of publish it. I would really love to publish Kolos as a book, because I run Fate very differently than it is quote unquote supposed to be run. And so I would like there to be a way to, some kind of text that talks about running it in a slightly different frame.
You Trooperify it.
Yeah, how to like basically how to take it how to take it from more meta into more less meta.
Yeah.
But so I really want to do that. I can't do that right now. So it would be nice. But there are things that I want to do. I want to. I mean, one thing I really, really want to do, and I should be able to do it. I mean, I want to continue doing Cthulhu Confidential a bit more of that because that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I really want to do, and I should be able to do it, I just need to, and I already did a bit of a test to make sure it would work in Roll20, is I really want to run an arena, a GURPS arena,
Oh, okay.
where people in my chat, in the community can sign up and we just, do like, a week or two where it's just some bouts, no real RP, but
Yeah.
just some good one-on-one, uh, you know, what do you call it? Like the pyramid sort of thing. And because for me, I love GURPS for tactical combat. Like I mean, I've played in GURPS games where there've been no combat at all. And that one game with the character who was a bigot was 3 years and we had 2.5 combats in 3 years.
Yeah.
So I played games with no combat, but I actually really love the tactical options
Yeah.
in GURPS combat. So I would love to just sort of for fun run like an arena. Everyone says that arenas never work on Twitch, and like I don't care what anybody says about anything ever. So
I
I
mean,
want to run it.
I ran a show on like not an RP but just gaming show,
Mhm,
which was called Council of the Beard, which
mhm,
was I'd take a game like Civilization, for example,
mhm,
or Stellaris, and I would have the entire game run by the chat,
mm,
whereby in like Civilization you have like you can research
mhm,
technologies and you can build.
mhm,
So I'd have like one person in chat would be the mayor of one of the towns I build, and they would choose what buildings to build in their city.
oh,
Um,
nice.
the research choices were made by a research council with a representative. So in my Discord would be like 5 or 6 people who were on the research council. They'd talk about what they wanted to research next, and then the representative would let me know in chat, and I'd choose that as the next research option. um like if you create an army, there's a general, and the
Mhm,
general will request units from the cities, and the cities will build the units for the, and it was all run by chat, and I just acted it out as like the puppet for chat, and
yeah.
they worked together to play the game, and they had like, it was so interesting. It's really fucking difficult to run, but people had so much fun. Like Courier said, like Council of the Beard, fun. um
Yeah,
and
and yeah, it's like,
it's
and I
like
know that like a no RP arena seems very unlike me, but actually I think it would be super fun. Uh,
it's the type of thing where people say it can't be done. What they mean is it's more work than it's worth. But in my opinion, if you're enjoying yourselves, and if you're really passionate about the things that you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's worth it, even in content
yes,
creation. It's
yes,
just you fucking do it and you enjoy it, and that's the point.
yes. But also I think that, I mean, in my opinion,
Yeah.
I've not seen it done well. I
Yeah.
think almost anything can work, but you just have to do it well. The one of the big arena games that I saw seemed embarrassed that they were an arena game, and I feel like that's not the way to go.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
like they're like we're an arena, but they're like, but nobody really wants. So like there was a lot of. I just didn't think it was particularly effective
A little bit
because I think
awkward and
yeah,
stilted. Yeah.
yeah, and they just I don't think they trusted the concept, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a bunch of like stand-up comedians making jokes, and the arena kind of went on the wayside, and
Mm,
they just didn't do it, you know? And
yeah.
I also think, if you're gonna do an arena, I mean, for me personally, like, I never really, Jer, I see you, Jer. I personally, um, don't tend to have fun doing arenas in D&D because I don't find the combat options interesting enough, um, to sort of sustain an arena. Like I want the combat options to be interesting. I want there to be an interesting puzzle. I want there to be some surprises. I want people to do things that uh, might, like, oh, that was interesting. And so I tend to want a system that gives you a little bit more variety in the things that you can do. And of course, I want maps, and I want the maps
Mm,
to matter.
mm.
So Now, maybe for all I know, D&D 4E might be really interesting for an arena. I would have to check it out. But
Yeah,
so, like, I think if you have a good system where the combat's interesting,
yeah.
and you make it interesting, I think you could do something really well with that. So I want to do that.
You know what could work for you actually? Well, like
Mhm.
weirdly, is Warhammer Fantasy, the latest edition. I think it's
Mm.
5e, the 5th edition. Um,
Yeah,
what?
that's based on BRP, right?
So it's so the only war system we're using now.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's basically the same D100 system, but for Warhammer. So fantasy
Hmm.
instead of
Hmm.
40k. So kind of like there's Skaven like Ratmen and orcs and dwarves and elves and etc. and high magic. Um, but the 40k systems are really chunky. They're really
Yeah.
like it's all based that you have loads of rules for. So if you're gonna like really want to get in, it depends how you want to run it, but
Hmm.
it could be interesting for you because the combat, when you are focusing on the combat, is a lot of fun and very very tactical and very interesting. It's just for a show, as you may as you may have noticed, for a show in these systems like the D100, 40k, and Warhammer systems, they slow things down so much that I'm just like, we have to take out a lot of the combat stuff, which takes like 5 hours to do a 2 minute fight. Um, but yeah, if you like at another point we can chat and I'll take you through the Warhammer Fantasy system a little bit and you can see if it might work for you.
I feel like Warhammer Fantasy was based out of BRP, which is the system that Call of Cthulhu uses
Yeah,
originally.
yes. Sorry, it is. I didn't know what it was called, but yes, it's similar to Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, and the thing is, when it comes to, I mean, this is a thing to note that people say, oh, really crunchy systems, they don't really work on shows, and I was like,
I
Critical
mean,
Role, like
yeah,
Critical
yeah.
Role, like sits there in there for a long time, and personally, I find that when it comes to really, it's about, do the players know the system, right? Like,
To re-clarify myself, they don't work for the way I play, the way I
yes,
GM
yes,
the
yeah.
systems and etc. Like they
But a
totally
lot,
can work if everyone
yeah.
knows what to expect. And
But also if the
yeah,
players know the system,
yeah,
right? Like, but that's also the case offline.
yeah,
Uh, that if the like, there are a lot of things that can be confusing and clunky if the players are not invested in knowing what the system is. Even things that are rules light, if the players are not invested in knowing the system, all of a sudden it can get really awkward.
yeah.
But if people know the system and know their characters, it can really sing. Um, but again, you need
You need people willing to learn the system and to really
yeah,
get into it. And yeah, yeah,
and be
definitely,
excited by
definitely.
it and enjoy it,
Yes,
which not everybody does.
true.
Which is not to say that all systems are great, because some systems, are not some systems don't do what they say they're trying to do.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put it that way, to be
And
kind
also
about
like
it.
Critical Role is a great example where a lot of people go into D&D expecting this kind of like narrative role play focused game and it's just not, you know.
But so here's the thing I think is so funny.
Yeah.
Uh, People are like, D&D, Critical Role is so terrible because it is so narrative.
Oh
It's
yeah,
just
I don't agree with
right,
that, but yeah,
no, at all, right?
yeah.
People are like, it's just so narrative, and everyone expects all this narrative stuff, and that's not how D&D is. Like, have you watched Critical Role?
Mm.
They bring out maps and minis and have 4-hour
Oh
combats.
yeah, yeah, they
Like,
absolutely
like,
do.
right? And so,
They
like,
embrace all parts of D&D. It's
yeah, they
just
do.
the thing people remember and the thing that sticks in their head is the role play, and because they're voice actors,
Yeah,
they can embody a character and they've had so much practice now that they're great role
yeah,
players as well.
yeah.
It all kind of coalesces and like one of the things that makes the in-person role playing so good is the way you can there's no talking over each other and interrupting each other the same
Hmm.
way because even that tiny little bit of delay from here in the UK over to the US means that there are moments when we both have something to say and we start talking and then one of us has to
Hmm.
be like, it's just a tiny amount of awkwardness that doesn't happen in the as much in the real like in-person games because there's no delay. There's kind of like the face-to-face interaction, which makes it so much easier and different.
Although sometimes it's worse because people
Yes,
just talk over each other all the
yes,
time.
that is true.
Uh, and if you're streaming, you have to have a little bit more discipline
Yeah,
on it, right?
yeah,
To sort of be a bit more aware. Yeah, it sort of depends. Anyway, I just think it's really fascinating how Critical Role is everything that people hate, uh, in the opposite way, right? Like, there are the
Yes.
people who are like, "Oh, well, I don't
Yes.
like Critical Role because it's too crunchy." People are like, "Oh, I don't like Critical Role because it's not crunchy enough." And I was like, "Interesting." Like, whatever it is, the thing that you, uh, uh, imagine, right, is like, Critical Role becomes sort of like, the thing that you are afraid, right?
It
Like,
it
"Oh."
it, em- it embodies the worst of what you personally don't want, because not only is it not only is it possibly different from how you play or how you like to view or whatever, it's also the popular thing. So it's a
Right.
very easy target for criticism.
And very often the thing that people are criticizing it for is just not true, right? And
And
I think that was
they're a lot
fascinating.
better. They're a lot better now that they're not like under the wing under the freaking chains of Geek and Sundry, which
And,
I
like,
personally have a very dislike for.
yeah, and, like, I just am like, you know, let it do its thing.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, it's just like, it's like, just let it do its thing. It's like, relax. Like, stop paying attention to other people so much.
yeah,
It's okay.
yeah.
The and I was
Like,
like,
delete that tweet, get off Twitter. You know that
just relax.
your super unique and hot take on Critical Role has been said
Yeah.
200,000 times. It's fine. You don't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I hate to tell people this. Um, there are a lot of people who don't even know what Critical Role is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There are a lot of people who have never been to a convention, they play in their hometown. This idea, like, there's just, like, a lot of variance, you know what I mean?
I
And,
mean, like this is the way I kind of like when I need perspective on these things
mhm,
on like anything. All I do is I think to myself, walk outside, walk up to the first person you meet and say PewDiePie,
right.
and they'll be like, "What the fuck are you talking about?
Who?
What are you?"
Yeah,
They won't even say who. They'll be like, What are you talking about?"
yeah,
That
yeah,
is not a word. You can't just talk. And it's like in our space, in our circles, that is a huge name that everyone you expect
mhm,
everyone to know. When you
mhm,
get outside
mhm,
of your circles, suddenly
mhm,
it's not an important thing.
yeah. And
So
I think about this with,
perspective.
and it's that funny thing, like, so, like, D&D, as a system dominates the RPG market
Yeah.
by a lot. Not by a little, but by a lot.
Yeah.
So that if you're like number 3 best-selling RPG, you probably are making like a tenth of what D&D makes. Like, I'm just saying, like, the skew is very broad.
Yeah.
Um, like, you look at, like, even things like, the vast majority of games that are not D&D on roll 20 are like in the less than 1%, right?
Yeah.
More people play a D&D first edition on roll 20 than they play a whole bunch of your favorite games, you know?
Mm,
But that said, we can think about how dominant D&D is, but D&D made, oh, what was the RPG market made? I think it was like $80,000 was the RPG market last quarter, according to, but the hobby games market is $2 billion,
mm.
right? Like, so, like, no matter how big D&D is, the hobby games market is not making its money off of D&D, it's making its money off of Magic and, like, everything else. Like,
And
so, like,
Warhammer
even, and
40,000. Yeah, sure,
Warhammer, yeah,
sure.
and miniatures and all this stuff, and no matter
Yeah.
how big D&D is and how dominant it is within our scene is so small.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, our scene is so small, and same thing with
And the
Twitch.
great thing
Twitch might
about
seem big, but Twitch is so small compared to YouTube.
yeah.
Like, we don't realize in so many ways, how insignificant we all are, and, like, we could just relax, that's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. And like one of the great things about Critical Role and D&D is they're very accessible,
Mhm,
which means that while you're not going to get a huge flood of people like going to Critical Role and then moving into other things, people still do. So like
of course they do.
if you have a successful role play show channel or yeah, like if you have a successful show in the TTRPG sphere, most likely it is thank you Critical
Yep,
Role, because
mhm.
I sometimes get a little bit grumpy that they're not very reach outy, in the sense of like, oh, here are interesting people that the other shows that you should go watch. But at the same time, this may not be true anymore. That this is like back when they started and they were like really ramping up. But like ultimately, we all benefit
That's right.
invisibly from the accessibility that Critical Role and D&D has. So
Yep.
while I might not really like the system, I still have some ideas of things I'd probably want to do with D&D, and because me and Trooper have a horrific tendency to run off on tangents, I need to pee again. So
Like I actually would I also want to run I want to run a D&D first edition or D&D box set for like a short shot
yeah,
uh because everyone talks about how it was back in the day and I was like, yeah, you're talking about how it wasn't back in the day you first off you weren't even born yet and that's not necessarily how it was back in the day. You like I would like to sort of like have an intervention in some of the fantasies we're creating about the early
mm,
80s late 70s because anyway, so there are a lot like I started playing D&D in 1983. Uh, like I have played a lot of D&D and there are other things I like better, but D&D does what it does
yeah,
and it does it well.
yeah.
Uh, and there's still things to do there. And I'm not mad if somebody loves D&D and
No.
plays it their entire life and never plays
No,
anything
no, no,
else.
no.
Like have a
And
good time.
there's no reason to try and like convert them or argue against them where you're like, yo, you can't enjoy D&D. It's like, no, you enjoy whatever the hell you want.
And there's certainly no there's it's certainly and the thing is I have gotten a lot of people to play games other than D&D,
Yeah.
usually by not talking down to them.
Yes.
Surprise. Like if I'm like, "You're so stupid and you don't know what real role playing is," they're not gonna be very receptive to playing
No.
something different. Uh,
But
you know,
if you say like, oh, why don't you try this? And then they're like, oh
yeah.
yeah, okay, I've been wanting to try something different. Let's go for it. And then you
Yeah,
have
it's
fun,
usually
and it's.
yeah. And it's usually just something along the lines of, "Hey, my gaming group, I wanna run a one shot of like, the James Bond RPG," and they usually say yes. Like
Yeah,
like it's just you just come to people in friendship and respect, and then usually it's gonna be fun, and they may
yeah,
like it or they may not, but, you know, like it's and also, like, I also know people who only play one system that's not D&D and D, and people don't yell at them. Like, I
yeah.
know people who only played VTM and have no desire to play anything outside of World of Darkness, and people don't yell at them, or
No.
people who only played Rifts or whatever, right? Like, it's fine. Like, let people do what they wanna do.
So I have a question for you, Trooper.
Yes.
And the rumors that I'm asking this question purely to set you up for a little bit of a promotion of yourself, so I can go pee, are lies. Um, what is the favorite show that you've done?
Oh.
As a GM or just on your own channel. And what are the details on it? Probably the details, enough details that would last a couple of minutes, so Sheepy can pee.
I see. I see. Well, the favorite show let's see now, there's a question between favorite show on my channel or favorite show on other channels. The favorite show on my channel would have to be City of Light and Shadow because that was the game that I've been wanting to run for 30 years, right? Like I've told people that, but I first saw a British TV show because, again, that was my life, called Wish Me Luck, which is a British TV show, 3 seasons. Um, I believe it's on Amazon Prime. I recommend it. It's really good. And it was about sort of British women airdropped into France to work for the SOE. And that show blew me away. That show was 1988 is when that show came out. And I watched that show and I remember there was a moment that really hit me. One, I was like, oh, wow, cool. Women's military history. This is really neat. And I really enjoyed it. The acting was great. But there was a moment that really struck me when I watched that show and it was so different from the kind of action shows that were happening in the US at the time. It was a moment where one of the main agents who was the courier and one of the person with this guy who was one of the sort of information gatherers, they were walking on the streets of Paris, uh, giving information, like, exchanging information. And they noticed there was a woman who was part of the milice who is not currently formed yet in our campaign. And she was looking at them and they looked at her and they're like, "Oh wow, look at her. She's probably like 18 or 19." But they noticed she was looking at them, so they're like, "We better split." So they split off. They went their separate ways. And the guy went to his apartment. When he walked into his apartment, that Melise woman was there, and she turned on him to face him. And I think she had a gun in her hand. She wasn't aiming it at him, but she had a gun in her hand, and he shot her. And in the U.S. In the 80s, in action shows, generally what happens is like a big it's like the foley is really loud and it's very dramatic. It's like pow pow,
Come
right?
on, what are you waiting for?
And the gunshot was quite subdued,
Mm.
and he hit her, and she kind of just stood there for a moment, kind of in shock, and she like looked at her wound and she was bleeding, and she kind of was confused about what was going on, and then he kind of freaked out, and he went and he held her as she collapsed and bled out and died, just like right in his arms. And then after that, he was messed up. Like they had some kind of a thing they had to do, and gunshots happened, and he started having PTSD and start remembering her, and he kind of freaked out. And they were like, "Wow, we have to send him back to the UK," right? And like he
Mm.
was sent back, and it really struck me the ways in which violence was treated so differently in that show. It wasn't like um, exciting and cool and awesome and a thing you want to do. And I was like, I really love that violence is shown here to be distressing.
Yes.
And I want to run an RPG like that. I want to run an RPG where violence is a little bit distressing, and I want to run an RPG that's really RP heavy, and that is low powered, and that is not about like super heroic, massively overpowered people, but really mundane things where walking down the street's a little bit scary. And I knew that I knew the system I wanted to run, which was GURPS at the time, but I didn't have the players, because the players were around me were not the kind of players that would enjoy a game like that yet. And I waited, and I spent the 30 years, right? 33 years gathering, reading firsthand accounts of people who were in the resistance, um, gathering information. Like I have a book on what all the documents and paperwork of that time period looked like if I wanted to make props. I just gathered so maps, everything you can imagine. I gathered for the last 30 years, and I was waiting for the time when I would find the players and find the context of people who would really, really do this thing.
Yeah.
And I finally got it. And so I would say um, that would be the favorite game that I have run on my channel.
Mm. Which everyone
Um,
should go check
yeah,
out instantly.
yeah, and that's like a and of course what's interesting is that people would say this is not a game to run. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like this is you should not run this game because it will not do well.
I
Because
mean,
historical is like one the least popular genre.
yeah.
Number one genre is fantasy, then sci-fi, then horror. Like at the very bottom is historical. Um, Also, there's going to be no magic in this game.
Mm.
It's going to be kind of like no one's going to watch this show. And I
What?
was like, well, that's interesting
Well, what?
that
What?
you think that.
What they mean is you won't get the through traffic. You won't become critical role to and it's like
Yep.
okay, but because I've had the same experience with
Yep.
Sunkist where it's like I put in the work and the world is quite realized and I run it differently from like fairly standard
Yep.
VTM shows and stuff. Um, but it's gathered a whole bunch of people who are very, very
Hmm.
enjoying it, and I'm happy with that. Like I'm like mission achieved, sweet. It's
Yeah.
what I wanted to do.
And the truth of the matter is, no one's going to be Critical Role,
Yeah.
point A. And the thing is, because I've been doing all these numbers, like my show's in the top 2% of RPG shows under the tabletop RPGs category,
Mm,
because most shows have 3 viewers. Like and I think that people look at your show and you're like, oh my gosh, my show is doing so poorly,
yeah.
but actually, it's probably not. If your show has like, I'm just saying that nobody would imagine my show's doing really well, but it actually is, because we have a very skewed view of what good is, because we're
S-
only looking at the top 5. We're looking at Critical Role as the marker of what good
Yeah.
is, but that's not a good marker at all.
So my marker for for a successful show, like TTRPG show, because the thing is we all have a lot of lurkers. People come in and
Mhm,
just want to sit back
mhm.
and watch the show. Engagement isn't necessarily a thing, especially in like
Mhm.
a long for like hours
Yep.
and hours of show. Uh, when I get that one person commenting
Yeah.
in like detail and
Yeah.
interest
That's
and
right.
enthusiasm, that's a successful show to me because it means
That
that
yes.
it means that when you expand that, everyone else is thinking that,
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
you can take a guess that people, regardless of what they're actually saying, are
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because
And
in general, aside from the obvious people who just are never happy with anything,
Yeah.
People only engage when they are extreme.
Yeah.
Extreme happiness,
Yeah.
extreme
Yes, that's right.
enjoyment, or extreme
Mhm.
hate.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So like if you have like anywhere from 30 to 100 people watching your show, if you get
That's insanely good.
insanely good, but also if
That's
you get
insanely
one comment of someone who's talking about the show and really interested in it, then you're like, yep, that's that shows me that I'm doing something that people are enjoying and like and etc. um
I mean, I think, Jared's like, "Mark, for a good show, in the end of the day, can you pay the cast?" You know what? There are a lot of
mm,
shows that are in the top 20 that don't pay their cast.
yes,
Most shows don't. Most shows do not pay their cast because they're not making any money. Um,
yeah, like I would say it's it's something whereby as long as there's transparency,
yes. Yep.
where you're like, hey guys, we're gonna run this show, we're not paying you.
Mhm.
Like in general, as long as everyone in the cast and everyone kind of, let's say, signing the social contract is happy with it, then that's fine.
Yeah.
um
I mean I pay for the cast for Colos out of my own pocket,
yes,
and,
it's pretty much where I'm heading for at the
yeah.
moment, because I want to take it seriously and pay my
Yeah.
cost. I have a plan to set up a Patreon so
Yeah.
like people can help support the cost and everything. But like
But and last season it was really great that not only was able to pay the cast, but I was also pay myself out of tips, bits, and Patreon. That was really great that
that's
it
really
didn't
cool.
actually
Yeah,
cost me any money. This season is probably not gonna be the case. I probably will not pay myself this season is how it's looking so far,
yeah,
which is fine. Um, but and if I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that it will that I will not that will the tips, bits, and Patreon will cover the cast cost,
yeah,
hopefully, but we will see. Um, but most channels can't do that,
yeah.
and I only do that because it's important to me and because I have a full-time job, so I can. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like a lot
yes.
of people can't; they just can't do it, and I don't judge them for that.
No.
It's important to me, but I know that most shows can't do that. And when people say things like, "If you're not paying your cast, $100 an episode, you're exploiting them," I was like, "Yeah,
Not true.
that's just not true."
Yeah.
I think
And
I think transparency is important. Like you say, transparency is important, and understanding and uh, being fair. Like doing what you can to make sure that, like for
yes.
example, if you can't pay them, but you have people on your channel um, playing in games in your channel, then you know what you should, especially if you have some kind of audience, you should be on their channel too. You know what I mean? Like if
Yes. One of just if I can,
yeah,
put my own experience. So, the reason that this exists, the Bar Brawl, is so that at the end of a stint on one of my shows, I can take my players who've just left my show and just talk about them and what they're doing
mhm.
and promote them. But sometimes I do a very bad job of it. Thank you, Trooper. Um,
I'm having a lovely time.
no,
I don't know about you.
me too, me too. But like that's the premise behind this idea is let's talk about the things you're doing, the things you've done. Let's push people to go check out more of your stuff because obviously it's nice to be like, hey, links in the description. But if you can get like a few people super interested in what people are doing, they'll go and check it, and maybe you get a couple extra viewers, or like maybe hopefully from this you'll get some people being like, oh, World War II, that sounds super interesting,
Yeah,
going checking it out and being like, hey, gonna give a little to the Patreon to support the cosplay.
yeah.
That'd be awesome. um
Uh, Dot Gas says, I just don't get the concept. I could never accept being paid for a show. And I think what I would say is this, and this is also why I want to pay my players. My players have spent money to get good mics,
mm,
to get good cams. They spend money on their cosplay. They also spend 4 hours doing a lot of work. Uh, they promote the show, and um, like they're doing work.
yes.
And some of them, the reason why they can do this work is because they get paid for it.
And
Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do the work. You know what I
very
mean? And
sorry, just very often they are streamers and content
yeah,
creators, and you don't want to be in a situation where like they're sitting there and they're asking themselves, what's the benefit for me being here? Like,
Yeah.
eventually, you're in any show, you're always going to have a moment where you're like, I'm a little bit tired. I'm a little bit
Yeah.
like, I've been working hard. I could, like, as
Mm-hmm.
much as I may enjoy the show in general, right at this
Mm-hmm.
moment, I'm not having fun. Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the way I get around or try to get around that is being very, very flexible with times. So if one of my
Mm-hmm.
players is like, "Hey, how's everyone doing?" I'm like, "I'm good. How are you?" And they're like, "Didn't really sleep very well. I've been working a lot." I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "Take the night off then. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm not paying you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it like I want to give people the best show I can so that they're
Yeah.
enjoying themselves and be flexible in times and how often they have to commit because sometimes
Yeah.
you just need a day off and you don't
Yeah.
want the like sometimes I've had people who are just like I am messy in the head today. I'm very emotional, I'm feeling rough and I'm like then you don't want to be, you know, messed about in
Yeah.
Vampire the Masquerade. You know, like take a day off,
Yeah.
chill with it, and you can come back next week with a fresher brain, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, so
And
that's
there's like
how
it's like
I get around, or not get around. That's how I make up for not paying my costs currently.
yeah. And then and Doc's like, but then it goes the other way. I'm not paying you becomes I'm paying you. And I also think about this, and this is something that is important for me. I'm an affiliate, right? I'm one of the 10% of Twitch streamers who is affiliated, which means my channel can be monetized.
Yeah.
And when somebody is on my channel playing an RPG, like every single one of my cast in Kolos is contributing to me earning money on my channel, right? Um, and it seems unfair to me to be making money off of their labor
Yeah.
without giving them some back.
Ooh.
And I don't make a lot of money, let's be honest,
Mm,
right? I
mm,
don't. But what happens if I do?
yeah.
What happens if I'm not paying my cast at all and they're working, 4 or 5 hours on that stream, spending their money, all that, and then all of a sudden I start making $100,000 a year
Yeah.
on my channel? Not going to happen, but it has happened with
But
other channels,
if
right? It has happened with other channels. There are other channels that have had 10 episodes, 10 shows a week, 7 shows a week. Other people are jamming on doing all sorts of work on that channel, and that channel makes 6 figures a year and nobody gets paid except the person who runs that channel, and that seems super exploitative, right?
yeah.
And so uh,
It's especially I you know well let's keep things friendly. I won't like say names of places or anything,
yeah,
but
that's right.
there are places that have like viewer interaction where you mess with the
Yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know like give someone a crit success
yeah.
or like have an event happen for money,
Mhm.
and it's like at that point you that is where I would and we all draw our
Yes.
lines at different places. That's where I draw the line. I'm like that's some bullshit because you're not only expecting your players to compromise for the show,
Mhm. Mhm.
which just
Mhm.
happens as a player on a show. You're also exploiting your players and you're messing with their game for money, essentially. And I'm like that's some bullshit. I don't you know like that's when if you're not paying your players, I'll call you out and I'll be like nah you
Yeah.
should pay your players if you're like doing these type of things to get more money.
Yeah, and Doc says it's about expected quality, and that's true, right?
Yeah.
I think it is about expected quality. If you're just if like I've seen those, and also like if your channel's not monetized at all, I do certainly do not expect anyone to get paid at all. If you're not making any money, then nobody's making any money, and I actually think it's unfair to expect anybody who's streaming to get paid when the vast majority of streamers are not even
It
monetized.
it would also be just to like inject another thought in there. Communication is key when you're running a show.
Yeah.
As a GM, you know, always communicate with your players and make sure they're okay with what's happening and or check-ins at the end of shows.
Hmm.
I like
Hmm.
to like even if my players seem perfectly fine and everything, if there's something I'm worried about, I'll check in with them and just make sure. But
Yeah.
like say for example, Doc, you were on one of my shows and everyone else was getting paid. I would probably like every month or so check in with you to make sure that you're still happy about not being paid because like your perspective can change as time goes on and you're like well everyone else is getting paid, but I'm not being offered to be. It can lead to problems. So it's very much like never take things for granted, and just kind of go with that type of thing. Like if
And I
someone was to come, I'm sure Trooper, you'd be the same. If someone
yeah.
was to like guest on my show, or do like a start a campaign and be like, I don't want to be paid, we talk it through and figure it out. But
Well, what I did, because I had a player
yeah.
for whom that was the case.
Oh, interesting.
Uh,
Yeah. You go.
right? They're like, I don't need to be paid, and so what happened was that I gave their pay to charity every
Okay.
month, and every month I was like, hey, do you still want me to? I mean, do you still want me to send this to charity? And they
Yeah.
said yes, and so I did. And so sometimes there's some people who like me also have full time jobs, and they don't need the money, and they're like, hey, roll it back into costs for the show.
Yeah.
At this point, and most of the time, like I had really one player, and that player I gave all their money to charity, and I it was like a bit of a fun thing for me to figure out like what is the perfect charity for
Mm,
this player. And I
mm,
was like, I'm gonna find the perfect charity for them, and then I did. And some people um, cannot take money
yeah.
because they're not allowed to legally.
Yeah.
And so then you find out what you can do. And there are a lot of different ways to compensate people other than money if you don't have it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, for example, you can maybe give them the PDF of the game that you're
Mm,
playing.
mm,
Or I try to do a gift for my like a little gift for my cast, like in a thank you note, like give them thank you notes. Like there are all sorts of ways to like I know somebody who does a labor exchange, right?
yeah.
So they don't get paid, like they don't pay the person, but um, they do uh, YouTube stuff for them, right? Like
Mm,
they do all the YouTube uploading,
yeah.
or they'll do trailers for them. Like there's so many different ways to. It's all just basically about making sure that everything's transparent and that people don't feel cheated.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and but like Doc says, if the quality of the show is not expected, like look, if it's a show and you're not expected to be there, like you can be there or not. You could have a you could just use your webcam and like your built-in camera. That's cool, and everybody's cool. Fine, then that's awesome too, right?
Yeah.
But and then cool, right? And I just think it's about being
Communication.
communication
Yeah.
and a sense and everybody feeling like what's happening is fair.
One thing that I have in all of my notes for Sunkissed, at the very top of my notes, I have a little asterisk on both sides, like reminders, because I'm very I find myself very easily forgetting things that
Mhm.
aren't important to me. So I have reminders on all of my notes when I open up Sunkissed and we're doing the game, where it's like, remember to check in with people, remember to make sure
Yeah.
people are cool with certain things, and it's just like
Mhm.
reminders for things that aren't my own personal like flags up, where I'm like, oh, this is the thing I have to do. It's like if you're a messy person, you'll forget to clean up after yourself. But if you
Yes,
have
yeah.
notes everywhere saying clean up after
Yeah.
yourself, you're like, oh
Mhm.
yes, I should do that. Like it's not something you don't want to do. It's something that doesn't like fit in your head right, so that you remember to do it.
And
So
and I and I
yeah.
and I also want to note that the model for RPGs is also very tricky, right? Because
Yeah.
there is the model that you should be paying your players, but there's also a model where players pay the GM in order
Mm,
to play.
mm,
Um, right, that's also a model that happens
yeah.
where you are a player and you pay the GM, and
I've
people say,
I've
"That's ridiculous.
yeah.
That never like what?" But I was like, "You know what though? Um, actually, that's a very old model. When you go to a con, you
Mm.
pay,
Well,
right? You're over at Gen Con and you want to play that game of whatever, $5 to get into the table, or if you're playing at the local game store, a lot of local game stores say you have to spend $5 and whatever, right? So like there's a that has been a model for a long time, but that's a very different model
mm,
than you pay the players for working on your show.
because I'm a 40k GM, like a lot of people who know me as 40k man.
Mhm,
Um, I've received a lot of emails from people asking me to GM
mhm,
like private
mhm,
games and stuff for pay.
mhm.
Um, because they're like, we really like how you run 40k,
Yep.
and we want you specifically to run 40k
Mm-hmm.
for us. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to, but I'm not a private GM.
Right.
Like the way it would play out would be very different from what you experience as a viewer.
Mm-hmm.
And B, like, I just don't have the time, and I'm not able to do that. But
And there's the thing, right? There's the thing.
yeah,
I, I have not, I mean, some people, it may be worth it for them. Be like, you know what? Okay, I will GM your private game, but you do have to pay me because I don't have a lot of time.
yeah,
And if it's worth it for you, you will. If it's not, you won't, right? And
mm,
uh, but I also think, I mean, look, as a GM, it is old school way, right?
yeah.
Old school GM around the table at home. It is always appreciated when the players would bring me snacks because I'm the one buying all the books, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like a lot of games, the players would the players never spend any money on anything, and I'm spending like I don't know money on lots of books or whatever and maps and all of that. And
yeah,
we're all friends; it's all cool. But it was very nice when they would get the pizza. Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? Like, and so there's I think there's like a long history of just sort of thinking about uh, uh, ways to be friendly, right? Like maybe they would host it at their home, or maybe they would, you know, usually they would bring food. Is usually what the thing would be like
yeah.
in my old school days.
Much like much like a girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever.
Hmm.
Never get to the point where you take them for granted.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we are now officially way over the sun-kissed running time, so we've been going longer than a regular episode of an RP. Would you like to like, if you need to take a break, we can, and then
Oh no, I'm good.
we could do some tier lists. Wow, you are just you're a trooper.
I am a trooper.
uh,
This is true.
but yeah, like if you, I'm happy to keep going because this is essentially super interesting for me. But I also don't want to, keep you forever. So would you like to jump over to tier listing or?
Let's do the tier listing, but I have an answer
Okay.
to a question that was given in the beginning of the stream.
Was it one of mine?
No, no, it was Cold Drakes, I believe. And the
Okay.
question was what was the average viewership for Night Witches?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I ran the numbers. Average viewership for Night Witches 56.
Ooh,
And our peak was 98.
nice. Just like apropos of nothing, when I was gaming streaming on Twitch, I had a height of like 450, 500.
Ooh, that's good.
It was Blood Bowl 2, which is Warhammer Fantasy
Ah.
American Football. Um,
My very best stream, and this
yeah.
is so interesting, my very best stream that gave me the best numbers out of all like 4 something years I've been streaming was my musicology lecture.
Oh,
It was a one-off charity stream where I went and I gave a lecture on uh, African American protest music of like the 60s till now.
did
And that was my number one stream.
did you set that up for me for to like ease to effortlessly slide into the tier listing?
Maybe, maybe. And
Because
mhm. And I'll say
boom.
people did love that. And I'm going to say I am looking into finding, especially now that things have changed quite a lot, looking into talking to a lawyer about finding out the best language to use when the inevitable uh, copyright strikes happen, so I can be like, "Hey, fair use."
Yeah.
And I know that I can do it. So because I want to do another one of these streams because I actually really like doing public musicology, and I will do it again. I will
Is
do it.
is there a place to watch that? Like, do you have it up on YouTube or like a VOD or?
I could not put it on YouTube because that was struck so hard, but the
Yeah.
VOD is on my Twitch channel,
Okay.
TrooperSJP.
So for those of you watching on YouTube, there'll be a link to that VOD in the description, so you can just you won't even need to go search for it. You can just click on the link and go watch it because that sounds really interesting. Um, so